Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, degenerates of all ages, welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. It's Monday. We're here. We're talking fights, and I have somewhat recovered from the traumatic incident that was this past weekend at UFC Vegas 85. Holy crap. I am still sore from the beating I took on Saturday night. I could not believe the results we had last week. So we get 2 weeks. We have a slow start, one little loss, and one awesome, resounding victory, a 1 week break. And then I just fall to pieces, complete shambles this last weekend. Could not have been more wrong with the bets that I placed. But you know what? Here's maybe the worst part is that my reads were spot freaking on. So one of the problems, those of you who have been hanging out with me a little bit, maybe recall the dark period of our lives, 2022, where I just couldn't find water if I fell out of a boat. Yeah, that's the same kind of thing that happened this past weekend. We broke the fights down. We talked about a lot of things. We talked about a lot of really long props with good numbers on them. And then did I go and bet those? No, I didn't. I went and bet whatever other random things I felt like putting my money on. And it turned out horribly. I ended up getting my ass absolutely whooped. So let's just, you know what, real quick, I have to run through this. First foremost, hit the like button. This Pub Sports Radio, it's Monday night. We got to do a little mini recap here of last week and what went wrong here, because the first couple fights especially, I mean, I said first and foremost, I should not bet on Peterson versus Pogues. And then I'm sitting here going, you know what? I've marked Pogues as a fade. I don't care at all that this is going against my own angle, the Dana White's Contender Series fade, which I'm never allowed to go against it, right? That should keep us off anything, even if we decide to look at betting one of those sides. And I just go, you know what? I want to fade Pogues. That's it. I just want to fade Pogues. So we lose money on Peterson just right out the gate. And absolutely everything pointed at us just leaving it alone. Just leaving it alone. And even mid-fight in round 2, Pogues was plus money. Like, we could have looked at that and been like, you know what? He's up 2 rounds to none. And we're getting like plus money or near even money going into round 3. And I didn't even live bet it. It's just like, that was just a stupid way to go down with the ship. We absolutely could have bailed out, even if it was a live bet on fight night. Didn't do it. Almost the same exact situation with Carolina and Julija Stoliarenko. I said all week that I like Julija Stoliarenko, but her cardio will be an issue if she can't get the takedowns early in round 1. If she gets out of round 1, she's in trouble, and we should look to live bet Luana Carolina. I even talked about sprinkling the round 2 and 3 props on Luana Carolina. Did I bet the round 2 and 3 props? No, I didn't. Did I wait till live bet it? No, I money lined Julija Stoliarenko on like Friday. For what reason? My own analysis was spot on, and Carolina even got the late finish. I literally just let that one fly me by. And again, when the first round was over and you could lay just a little bit of chalk on Carolina, knowing that she was going to be better for the next 2 rounds, did I live bet it? No, I'm a freaking idiot. That's basically all this comes down to. And we're almost done. We're almost done here. Real quick, just 2 more, because I talked about Lee. I talked about Lee and Builder and how I really wanted to be on the Lee money line. Instead, I bet the under. That fight could have gone under. It very well could have gone under. The under was maybe not a bad bet. However, Lee was obviously the side, and I talked about it, and I looked at it, and I decided to pull the wrong trigger. And last but certainly not least, Molly McCann, Diana Belbita. Even at 2-1, Molly McCann was the side the whole week, and we talked about it. Belbita being, a shell of herself and 1 foot in the grave, and the retirement talks and moving to Canada, all of it, absolutely all of it pointed to Molly. And I parlayed her. The other leg lost, so I made no money on the best spot on the entire board. And then on top of that, we had the absolute gift of Molly McCann by submission, knowing full damn well that every intelligent degenerate on the planet was betting that. We had the rando genius from Instagram in my DMs telling me that was the move. He's 2-0, by the way. And what did I do? If you guys have ever played poker, they call it fancy play syndrome, where you think you're smarter than your opponent. You level yourself. You go, I'm doing this, but that's because he did that, and now I'm doing this instead because he thinks that I'm doing the first thing. That works at a high level. That works in tournament poker. That works at the professional level. But if you're on a Saturday night and it's a couple of buds with their beers watching basketball at a card table, you don't need to think that hard. I leveled myself. I went, you know what? We're gonna play Molly McCann sub 2 and 3. You know why? 24-1 and 31-1, and those numbers are sexy as all hell. I think we can count on Diana Belbita to survive one round. And Molly armbarred her with 1 second left on the clock. I kind of feel like that one's a bad beat. I'll be honest with you. I don't know if that was necessarily my mistake so much as an unfortunate set of circumstances. Not only did Molly armbar her, but holy shit, Diana Belbita, if she wasn't gonna retire last time, she's definitely retiring this time. Molly didn't break her arm, but she sure as hell hyperextended it. Long story short, there were a million... Gilbert Urbina. I talked about Radke by KO, right? I talked about not trusting Urbina at that money line. Did I bet the money line on Radke? No. Did I bet the KO prop at 5-1 when I talked about that one too? No, I didn't. I bet an under. I laid minus 160. That was the only bet I cashed the entire night. Awful. Absolutely awful. Disgraceful from me. There was so much money to be made last week, and every other person who we love on Instagram, on Twitter, all the other YouTube handicappers, they all stacked racks this past weekend, and I buried myself. 14-unit loss this past weekend. If it was raining titties, I went outside, looked up into the sky, and still caught a dick in the face. That's what happened this past weekend. So I'm angry. I am ready to go. I am ready to break these freaking fights down. It is time. Now, I do want to apologize to all of you watching. I see my guy Mushroom MMA in the chat. As freaking always, congrats. He hit the Carolina round 3. There you go. Love to see it, buddy. Love to see it. So our guest this evening is none other than the man himself, James Lynch. There might be some kind of a timing error or something like that, though. Maybe we didn't link up on the right time zone or something, because he is nowhere to be seen, and that's not like James. I certainly hope everything is okay, because he's usually very prompt. I'm hoping it's a miscommunication with the time and such, because we definitely don't want it to be anything besides that. Hopefully he can jump in here for us in just a few minutes. Hopefully he gets caught up with us, and we'll kind of just bring him in as soon as he gets here. He's got the link to join the show as soon as he arrives. However, we can't wait more than, 10 minutes or so for our guy to get here. I don't want to have y'all twiddling your thumbs when we should be talking about MMA. We should be talking about bets, and we'll let him recap a little bit as soon as he pops up and gets here. So thank you all for being here with me. We've got already over 60 live viewers. So those of you who are here, please, like I mentioned, hit the like button already and subscribe if you haven't here to Pub Sports Radio. But let's get straight on into this bad boy. UFC Vegas 86. We've got some room to make up. We're negative for the year. My diehard MMA podcast record, we were down 3-4 units, up 10 units, and now we're down 14. So we're like 6-ish in the hole. I mean, we're just getting started. We got the whole year. We're coming off of an 80-unit winning year. So not to be afraid. Don't abandon ship. Don't fire, don't burn the boats. We're okay. We're here, but we definitely got to get right. And there's some big cards coming up. And I got to tell you guys, I don't normally look way out into the distant future and set up bets and make bets and picks on fights that are way off in the distance. I got my eye on a couple. I might actually be locking in some bets a little further down the road coming up, because there's some spots I really like and I don't want to miss out on. So keep an eye out on the feeds, Twitter, Instagram, etc., for when I do go ahead and make those moves. But we got to talk about Saturday's fights first and foremost, don't we? First fight up, we've got Daniel Marcos. He is taking on Aoriqileng and the man with no first name. Very interesting fight here. Very, very interesting fight. So we've talked about Daniel Marcos a couple of different times. I like this guy. I like this guy. So he's coming off Dana White's Contender Series, and he is, I like to call him a pot shot power striker, right? Like, he's extremely patient. He picks his moments. He doesn't really get off on volume, but he keeps a decent pace. Even though he's only firing like 1 or 2 shots at a time, he does it and doesn't like sit back Sam Alvey style and like wait for 20 seconds to tick off the clock before he does it again. He's doing it every couple of seconds. So even though he's not throwing 4 or 5 punch combos, he still keeps a relatively high pace and kind of works his opponents with that style. And every single time he throws something, it's with enough force that you can tell it hurts. It's impactful. He's not a guy that you can take lightly. The one critique I have with Daniel Marcos is that he will drop his hands. He will try to flurry on people. If he's got you hurt and he thinks he's got like a finishing sequence, a moment that he can take advantage of, he will drop his hands and go for it. And in those moments, I do believe that there are some people that will in the future be able to take advantage of him. I do think there's going to be some people who will be able to potentially hurt him and maybe make him pay in those moments. But at this point, he's 15-0 and hasn't run into anybody who can take advantage of that. He's coming off the win against Davy Grant. And you guys know my love for Davy Grant, right? Like, we know we're fans of Davy Grant, his fighting style. He's almost a gatekeeper in this weight class type of thing. But at this stage, this feels like a step down to me. Aoriqileng 25-11. Now, he is fighting out of fight ready. And you guys know that that is, absolutely one of my favorite gyms in the world. Actually, I should retract that. I'm not sure if he's fighting out of fight ready or if he just did his last camp at fight ready. I didn't see him at fight ready on Instagram. So I do want to just go ahead and mention he's cross-trained over there a couple times, but I don't actually believe he's fighting out of that camp. He's coming off of a big win over Johnny Munoz Jr., and that's the best win on his record, right? Like, his wins are Cameron Else and Jay Perrin. Nothing really to write home about. And then that's his whole record in the UFC. He's 3-3 so far in these 6 fights with 1 good win. Losses to Jeff Molina, Cody Durden, Amin Zahabi. But he does seem like he's kind of coming into his own here just a little bit at 135 pounds. He hits really hard. He's one of these guys that hits hard enough that he gets people's attention, but it also doesn't seem like he's really finishing anybody. It's a very strange situation to find yourself in. 30 years old, stalking forward pressure. Everything he throws is hard. That big right cross that he's only got a 58% takedown defense, though. And that's the thing that I think is going to be a bit of an Achilles heel for him. Like, Munoz, even though Aoriqileng won that fight, Munoz took him down 4 times in that fight. There was just no significant resistance to the takedowns in that spot. He did hurt him with Munoz hurt Aoriqileng with the very first punch he landed in the fight. Can you believe, you look back at the numbers, he only landed 7 significant strikes. I am a fan of Johnny Munoz Jr., and I think he's got a decent skill set, but that was like a shell of himself type of performance. I don't even know what that was because he did nothing. He was afraid to get in range to touch this guy. He basically absorbed damage, threw back a couple times, and then was level changing for his life every opportunity he got. That's literally all that guy did in that fight. So it's a really weird situation. I feel like Daniel Marcos is clearly the side, and even though Aoriqileng won his last fight, it seems like it was kind of a hollow victory. I mean, not a very good strength of schedule, and then a weird win over a guy who refused to throw his hands. But this line is kind of fishy to me. It's super weird because Daniel Marcos, he's 15-0, undefeated. Like, he's all hyped up. Everybody's going to bet him, but they're hanging a 2-1. Like, I just feel like it should be 250 or higher. It's one of those ones where I don't want to grab my tinfoil hat too early in the evening. But why is this number not higher? I don't know. I want to see these guys weigh in. I want to see these guys face off. I'm a little scared to lay the chalk on Daniel Marcos, if I'm being honest. But I do think he's the pick. I think he's the side. I think he's the guy that you got to go with. I do want to go back and, like, run the roundtables, talk to my guys, see if I can pin down where Aoriqileng is actually training for this fight. Because if he is doing it at Fight Ready and they do have a game plan, then that makes a big difference there to me. But if he comes in doing exactly what he's done in his previous fights, like the Eamon's a hobby spot, man. I got blasted in that fight. The same as him. I had such a big bet. Aoriqileng is a guy that I had never been really sold on, and then after his wins over Elson Perrin, I was like, okay, like maybe he's figured it out. We're on track here. He's super durable, never been finished, and then he gets one punched by Eamon's a hobby of all people. You can't trust him. You can't trust the guy. Now it doesn't take a whole lot to trust a live underdog. He is a decent sized underdog in this spot, so I get it if that's the side that you want to look at, but it won't be me. Certainly won't be me. I'm going to go ahead and pick Daniel Marcos here in this spot. Careful parlaying, guys. Just be super careful on this one because I've got a weird feeling he should get the win, but I could see it being like a back and forth 15-minute beat 'em up where neither guy is able to get the other one out of there. Both guys are landing power shots, questionable decision making by the judges, that kind of a thing. So that's the read for the first fight for sure. Next up, we've got Hyder, and he's taking on Fernie Garcia. Fernie Garcia filling in here on extremely short notice. 8 days, short notice, I believe, taking on Hyder, who is making his UFC debut. Fun fight. Interesting fight. So Hyder is 8-0, if you guys recall. He did win his last fight on Dana White's Contender Series, and he's been trying to make his UFC debut for some time. He's had two opponents, both of them pull out leading up to this spot. And he's 33 years old. You guys know exactly how I feel about these fighters that are making their UFC debuts and getting their careers rolling at 30 plus years of age. It doesn't work out for a lot of them. I mean, obviously there are exceptions, right? But most of them are a completed package by that age already. They're not going to improve leaps and bounds. So if they're not ready to be like a gatekeeper or a contender, like getting here at that age, they'll have 4 or 5 fights, they'll win 1 or 2 of them, and then they get the boot. So, like, I don't know how excited I really should be about Hyder. He's very crazy aggro. Like, he's perfect for Dana White's Contender Series. The dude comes forward, punches his way into range, looks to grab up that body lock, very hands boxing heavy style attack. And I will give him credit. Got very, very fast hands. And the one thing he does do nicely is he'll switch ranges and he can land big, powerful, meaty elbows. He hurts people with those elbows. Attacks the body very well. That's one of those things where I like it because even if you've got a durable, tough opponent or a guy with great cardio, working the body over the course of a couple of rounds, that can pay dividends late in the fight. So Hamel's definitely, Amil, sorry, not Hamel, Amil definitely has a style that I like, and I think he's going to be very entertaining. He'll be fun to watch for sure. In that Dana White's Contender Series fight, though, he got dumped super easily. I mean, early in the fight, you know your opponents are full, fresh, and have everything going for them when the fight starts and not necessarily in rounds 2 or round 3. He had a good urgency to get up once he got taken down, but damn, man, he really did not have an answer. He got taken down super cleanly, super easily. I like the fact that he worked his way up quickly. I like the fact that he knew exactly where he needed to be. He got to the fence. He got to his feet, but he looked exhausted at the end of round 1. And maybe one of those types that can just kind of mentally push through it. Maybe one of those guys that he's strong enough and good enough to just say, you know what, I might be tired, but who cares? We're going to keep punching anyway. That might be the situation with this kid, but I've got questions. At 33 years old, sketchy, questionable takedown defense against a poor level of opposition. Oh man, it just seems this guy seems like a bust waiting to happen. His opponent, Fernie Garcia, 10-4. This is the guy filling in on 8 days' notice that I talked about. He is 0-3 in the UFC off of Dana White's Contender Series. He's training out of Fortis MMA, and he has just not done anything. This guy, he's one of those fighters that looks like he's got all the pieces, right? I very much like to think of him in the vein of a Sam Alvey. He has everything he needs. He's a solid grappler. He's a decent wrestler. He's got decent cardio. He's got good power. His striking is very good as well, but he's just so low volume. Like, if you want to be nice, you call the kid patient. Like, you can call him patient. You can say he waits for the right shots, but at the end of the day, he just gets so far behind. He sits there waiting for that perfect shot, that perfect opportunity, and it just doesn't come. And if he doesn't drop you to steal around, if he's not knocking you out and finishing you, it's incredibly difficult for him to actually win fights. It's crazy because he's actually got 6 wins by decision. He's got 4 losses by decision. So he's very tough. He's very durable. He's hard to submit. He knows what he's doing in there. One of the losses that he had was by split. But if you want to make that argument, you got to go back and see that 3 of his regional scene wins were also by split. So like he's in these very, very closely contested fights with guys who have terrible records, 9-6, 3-4. Like, oof, like he's just never, ever distancing himself. And this is something he's done literally his entire career. He actually had a really decent sized amateur run. If anybody's gone back and taken a look at some of his AMI stuff, he's got like 10 amateur fights. And most people, when they know they're legit, when they know they're going to be something, when they know they're good, they have like a handful, maybe 6, 7, something like that. This guy kept going, had 10 of them. And guess what? Dropped 2 of his last 3 fights by split decision. So, I mean, it's one of those ones where you go like, okay, he was in those fights. It was close. It was competitive. He'll turn pro. He'll figure it out in the next couple of years. No, that's his whole story. Every single fight since then, he's going to splits constantly. This is one of those fights that I think you could make an argument for the split decision prop just based on this kid's history. Now, with the short notice nature, he's filling it at 145 pounds. This kid fights at 135. Fernie Garcia has been a 135er his entire run, and now he's filling in short notice against Hyder Amil at 145. This is where I have questions, because does that help his cardio? He's already a guy who's low volume and hits hard. Does that help his power? Like, does he translate to 145 and maybe have more success hurting his opponents up a weight class? Is he one of these guys that's maybe cutting a little too much weight and he's low volume because he's worried about gassing out? I don't think so, but it's possible, right? Like, you never know what happens when these guys jump weight classes. The reality is he's probably throwing one last Hail Mary out there, telling the UFC, give me one more crack at it. You guys need a short notice. He's saving the day by keeping this fight on the card, and he's got to go for it. He absolutely has to go for it. I can't wait. I want to listen to his interviews this week, because when he gets on the mic, I want to hear where his head's at. That if he's like, oh, I was just unlucky, I'm just going to take a fight. Like, then we're fading him. We're fading the absolute shit out of him. But if he comes in with like a vengeance and he's like chip on the shoulder, got to get the win, do or die type of situation, maybe you take a flyer on the dog here in this spot. I like, I don't like either of them. This is a pass. If we're being honest, this is an absolute pass. The line is interesting, though. Hyder Amil is a minus 185 favorite, so you can get plus 155-ish on Fernie Garcia. And I'm not trusting Hyder Amil. This is a Dana White's Contender Series spot, right? Like, even though it's a weird one, this is a Dana White's Contender Series fade spot. You've got a guy coming in with no UFC experience, taking on a guy who's been here for a minute, and they're running into each other. Now, the difference on this one is that you've got a guy coming up a weight class on short notice, and that's an angle that I love to abuse, because you just don't do your best work either on short notice or changing weight classes. So we've got conflicting angles there. I'm going to side with Hyder Amil going ahead and getting the win here, because he should simply have more volume, more ways to win. He's the bigger guy. He is stronger, but he's also so aggro that I could see Fernie Garcia clipping him. I really could. I don't necessarily think Fernie's got the game plan to come out here and put his wrestling boots on and take Hyder down for 15 straight minutes. Hell, I don't even know if he's got the cardio or the ability to do that. That would be the path to victory. I just don't think he's got that skill set. So we're going to go with Hyder Amil, and we'll say decision, because it's Fernie Garcia and he doesn't lose inside the distance. So unless his cardio is just absolutely destroyed coming in here on short notice, he should be able to go the full 15 minutes, and we probably get another decision out of him. The next fight up, Zach Pauga taking on Bogdan Guskov. And yes, it's the guy that our buddy Marcel likes to say looks like me on Twitter. I need to shave my head. I'll look exactly like that guy, just older. And it's good times. I love our buddy Marcel. Okay, so getting into this one here, I don't want to talk about either of these guys. Zach Pauga, you guys know I'm not a Zach Pauga believer. I'm not at all a Pauga believer. 6-2. He won the Ultimate Fighter, or I guess should I say lost the Ultimate Fighter to freaking Usman's little brother. They stacked the deck on that one a little bit, didn't they? He was Zach Pauga's a 205er on the Ultimate Fighter, fighting heavyweights so that Usman's brother could get an easy layup win into the UFC and be crowned the Ultimate Fighter. Who knew? But he is making some changes, right? After having some trouble, he's 1-2 in the UFC, and the only win came over Jordan Wright by decision, guys. Oh my God. We bet Zach Pauga. That's the only time we've bet Zach Pauga, I think. No, we bet him in his UFC debut, actually. I'm making a mistake on that one. So I'm 1-1 betting Zach Pauga. But the night that he fought Jordan Wright, I was like, Jordan Wright's the chinniest guy in the UFC. He's the glass cannon of glass cannons. The guy has no durability. If you touch him once, he's going to go down. And Zach can absolutely clip this guy. He's a former heavyweight, dropping to 205. He was always too small for the weight class, but at 205, he should hit harder. He should do better. And he dragged Wright to a greasy-ass decision. What a terrible fight. What a terrible thing to have on your resume. Like, the UFC is literally like lowballing you a highlight reel, maybe even get you 50 G's by throwing Wright your way. And Buddy can't take advantage. Buddy couldn't get the job done. He's training at Elevation now, I guess, with Blades and Devin Clark. He's 35 years old, and as someone who's sitting here at 36, I can tell you things do not get better at that stage of life. Coming off an L to Modestas Pakauskas, which also, by the way, not a very good look. We did call that one, though, so props to us there being on the right side for that one. I'm not really sure what he's good at. That's the big thing for me with Zach Pauga. I really don't even know what he's good at. I would say he's got decent power, but he went 15 minutes punching Jordan Wright in the face and couldn't get him out of there. So is the power really decent? Like, probably not. He mixes in his takedowns pretty well. I'll give him that. Like, he does transition between strikes and grappling well, but he just pins people up against the fence. He's absolutely like a grinder slog type of fighter. He's not even going to bother taking you all the way down. He'll just press you up against the cage. Good knees to the body. Pretty nasty clinch game. I'll give him that. Like, if you stick around in the clinch with this guy, you're going to take some big shots. You're probably going to get hurt. But he's just a grinder. Good cardio, good pace. That's it. He's relatively durable. Good cardio, good pace. Everything else is just kind of meh. Just doesn't seem to have enough power. And his opponent is almost the exact opposite. So Guskov, yikes. I don't even want to talk to you guys about this one. So he is 0-1 in the UFC. Made his UFC debut against Volkan No Time Ozdemir, and oh baby, I came on here and I spun myself a story that night, didn't I? I said this kid coming out of Uzbekistan who's got all these round one knockouts, and it seems like Volkan Ozdemir is on the decline. He's fading. He's just not doing so great. Looks like his cardio's falling off a cliff. Looks like his durability's gone. They're bringing in this kid Guskov to get him a layup win over a big name. And even though he's not trustworthy based on the records and the people that he's fought, this will be the that'll be the spot that I stick the tinfoil hat on. I'm like, no. He's everyone thinking Ozdemir, obviously, but it's actually going to be Guskov. Well, boy, was I wrong. Guskov looked awful. Looked absolutely awful. Now, I don't know if it was a case of nerves. It could have been, but he looked far more wild and uncontrolled in that fight than I've ever seen him. And I know he does throw wildly. He comes out and starts fast. He does throw hard. He does throw early. But even for the guy who does those things, he looked sloppier than ever before in that fight. And pretty much death-gassed within like 2-3 minutes. And every time Volkan touched him, it was apparent that Volkan was the much cleaner striker. Volkan had the power advantage. This guy was just completely falling apart. He's a total can crusher. And then he got tapped out by Volkan Ozdemir. I mean, who the hell? Like, oh, that's one of those ones where you're like, oh, if you had a KO prop, I feel really bad for you. I feel really bad for you because it was there. And Volkan decided to grab a neck instead. This is a spot, though, where I'm going... If I thought this guy was good enough to take out Volkan Ozdemir, do I not think he's good enough at plus money against Zach Pauga? Zach Pauga is sitting about minus 135 at this point, plus 114, plus 115 on Bogdan Guskov in this spot. And I almost feel like on principle, I need to run this one back. Because if I am willing to bet multiple units, I think I bet multiple units. Let me check that. Let me check that actually, because I think I put a 2-unit bet on him for this one. I'm gonna go find that real quick. But if I'm willing to bet on Guskov against a guy like Volkan Oezdemir, even if I felt like Volkan Oezdemir was shot at the time, that's an entirely different universe than 1 and 2 Zach Pauga. Now, this is definitely going to be a case of early versus late, right? Yes, I put 2 units on him. 2 units at plus 155. So woof. What an absolutely awful decision by myself here on that one. He's going to be the one that clips early, right? We've seen Zach Pauga hurt a couple times, and then we've seen him kind of revert to that cage clinch, push you up against the fence type of fight plan, and that might work. However, I do think that in this day and age of damage over control, that if Zach can't knock out a guy like Jordan Wright, I don't know that he can knock out a guy like Guskov. And if he can't knock out Guskov, even with bad cardio, if he's just kind of pinning him up against the fence, but Guskov's hitting him with big shots and you can hear the impact and maybe he drops him, I think that's going to be the difference in the fight. So even if it does go to a decision, believe it or not, I think Guskov might actually be live under that scenario. And there's just a massive athleticism and power discrepancy between these guys. So if anybody is going to be getting an early finish, and I'm putting myself right back in trouble here on this one, because watch, Zach Pauga is going to come out and remind us all after I've talked for 10 straight minutes about how he can't punch anybody out. He's going to lay this dude out and end up finishing him in the first round the same way Volkan did. But if I had to put money on which guy was going to finish the other, I think Guskov has a better shot at finishing Zach Pauga early, more so than the opposite. I do think there's a big discrepancy in the power there. And there's also just a big difference in, like I mentioned, the athleticism and the physicality. It does list on UFC stats that Guskov is just like 1 inch taller than Pauga. They've got a matching 76-inch reach. But Guskov's got more of the frame that I like to see. And I do think he's got more of like the aggression and output and stuff like that I do like to see. Pauga's pretty hittable. And I know Usman's got like crazy stupid power, but if that monster can find your chin, I think a guy that's faster like Guskov probably can too. After the week I had last week, I probably shouldn't talk myself into a bet on Guskov, but at the end of the day, I do think I do think that unfortunately Guskov is the right side. I think this probably should be a pick 'em, maybe at worst. And you could maybe argue for reasons of Guskov being potentially favored. It's thin margins, folks. This is exactly like betting on the heavyweight fight last week, where you probably don't need to, you probably shouldn't, you might not have to. I might run it back with my guy Guskov and be like, you know what? Brush off the last one and try to get my money back, because Volkan Oezdemir robbed me blind last time. So apologies for the delay and apologies for the miscommunication on the time, but we do have none other than our guy James Lynch joining us on the show. James, how you doing, buddy?
I'd be doing better if I got the time right. I know exactly what happened here. In Arizona, you guys don't have daylight savings time. This happened with Jared Cannonier last week. So apologies, because normally when you have me on, it's 4:30 my time, but you're on mountain time now because you don't use daylight savings. So that was the miscommunication. But I'm here now. I'll make up for it.
I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, for sure. So glad we figured all that out. It was 30 minutes late, I guess. So it's supposed to be an hour later, but it's all good. It's all good. We're here and ready to make it happen.
I'm glad we caught it within a half hour though, because you're right. As soon as this went down, I was like, oh shoot, like I forgot the time change. I'll bet he's gonna pop on at like 5:30. And I was like, we'll make it work, obviously, but it's not as fun having half the show over by the time you get here. So I'm glad you saw me. I'm glad you could jump on. I appreciate you being here, and sorry for the miscommunication.
Don't apologize. I'm the one who's late, and actually shout out to my Discord. They were the ones who let me know, because I know people watch your show that are in my Discord. They're like, aren't you supposed to be on now? I'm like, I don't think so. I think it's 4:30 Pacific, which is usually when I'm on, but it's 3:30. Anyways, enough talking. What are we getting into? Have you talked about any fights yet? What's going on? Where are we right now in the show?
Gotta love it. So we're about 2 fights in so far to this point, James. If you want to take a minute, I did actually 3 fights. So I just wrapped up with Pauga versus Guskov. So we've got Daniel Marcos, Aoriqileng, Amil, Garcia, Pauga, Guskov. And I will just kind of give you free reign at this point to get caught up. If there's anything you want to mention on any of those fights, or if you have thoughts or anything you want to add on those, have at it, man.
So Pauga, I'll mention that fight only because I talked to Zach, and just, you know, kind of the big takeaway from the interview is obviously really upset with his last performance. And, you know, that was a fight that I think a lot of people felt should have gone his way, but he knows he's got to perform better. He loves this matchup from what he told me. And another key thing I think for this fight is that, you know, he trained right through the holidays. Like he kind of, if you watch the interview, he's like really like pissed off that, like, you know, things have not gone his way in the UFC. And I think he sees this as a great opportunity to kind of kickstart, you know, his year and kind of give the UFC a reason to keep him around. So really excited for this fight. And I do actually like Zach in this matchup. Bogdan, I mean, from what I've seen, I know he only had the UFC debut. I've seen a little bit outside of that. Not super impressed, but you know, we'll see. We'll see how this one goes down. This is a tough one to pick, actually. But if I got to pick, I'm going Zach in this one.
Okay. Yeah. So you and me are slightly leaning opposite on that one. You know, part of it though for me is I bet Guskov against Volkan Oezdemir. And it kind of is like, well, if I was willing to bet him against Volkan, I probably should be willing to bet him against Zach in this spot. Decent step down in competition for the guy. And I think he's got a huge power edge, man. I know that Zach is going to have a cardio advantage in this spot. He's got the experience advantage. He's fought much more legitimate people than Guskov has. I could just see him kind of getting clipped early, though. You know, Usman put him down without too much of a problem there. And really, I know Zach is frustrated with his last fight against Modestas, but man, how can you be happy with the Jordan Wright fight? Like, Jordan Wright is a guy that was given to you on a silver platter with no chin, and you dragged him for 15 minutes.
I think he's talking about overall in his UFC career. Yeah, sorry, I should clarify. I sort of meant like overall. Like, if you watch what he did on the regional scene or even on Tough, he looked a little bit better. Right. So I think he's sort of feeling like this is a good opportunity to kind of get back to his old self, so to speak, you know, because again, hasn't been very successful so far in the UFC. So that was sort of the big one. So there we go.
All right. Well, good to know. Good info. And folks, as you may or may not know, that's part of why we like to bring James on, best interviewer in the damn game. So he's always got these little tidbits after talking to his fighters and stuff like that. And he is kind enough to come on the show and share them with us. So make sure you support him. Make sure you give him a follow out there. James, is there anything you want to add on either of those other two first fights, Hyder Amil versus Fernie Garcia or Daniel Marcos versus Aoriqileng?
Don't have much to say on Marcos and Aoriqileng. That's one kind of could see it go anyway. I do like Marcos in that spot. So Hyder Amil, I'm actually interviewing him tomorrow. Quick story on him. I was scheduled to interview him last week, and like literally as soon as we started doing the interviews, like, oh, Melsik's out of the fight. So he's known for about a week and a bit that there was going to be a new opponent. In steps Fernie Garcia, someone I know quite well who trains out of Fortis. So I know Fernie obviously getting this call there a bit. This is a tricky one. You know, I see Fernie as a bigger favorite here. I could see Hyder going out there and pulling off the upset. I know, you know, Garcia's actually, you know, he's had the UFC fights. He's been a little bit more experienced there, but hasn't really blown me away. And obviously I know the last fight, there was a bit of hope there, right? With, even though he ended up losing that, he looked a little bit better than some of those other performances. But I think this is an iffy one because you got one guy who's basically trying to save his job. You got another guy who, you know, got his opponent switched up, but is coming off Contender Series, not as much pressure. It's an iffy one. I give Garcia the edge because of the experience, but it's also a fight that I do think is a good opportunity for Hyder in this matchup. So
yeah. And unless I'm mistaken, Garcia going up a weight class on this short notice opportunity as well.
That's another thing too. Yeah, I should mention that as well.
Yeah.
Mainly fighting it, in a lower weight class. So there you go.
Makes a big difference. Absolutely. All right. So a couple thoughts there from James. We are all caught up, everybody, and we're hitting up over 100 live viewers. So thank you all very much for being here on the Die Hard MMA podcast for UFC Vegas 86. But now we're getting into the good stuff, James. There's a couple of really fun fights on this card, and we are getting to them now. Jeremiah Wells takes on Max Payne Griffin. What a fun fight, man. This is one of those like age-appropriate fights where these guys are both absolute monsters, and maybe they've run into a little bit of rocky ground. Maybe they've had a little bit of a tough time, but they're definitely still hanging around. They're worth being here. They're not ready to be, sailed out on the retirement path just yet or anything like that, but they both could use a win. So you've got Jeremiah Wells, who's my personal favorite fire hydrant. This man is an absolute tank of a human being, and he's a Gracie BJJ black belt, not the most technical wrestler you've ever seen in your life, just kind of picks people up and slams them to the ground. Something weird always happens. You know, the fight that comes to mind, I think, Blood Diamond, where he was like sprinting around the side of the cage and trips like at the beginning of the fight or something. It's always weird. I don't know what it is with Wells, but something crazy always happens. His last fight was an absolute heartbreaker. He is beating Carlston Harris pillar to post. Harris has no answer, can't do a damn thing. And then it's those freakishly long arms. I know a thing or two about those, but Carlston Harris didn't even I don't even want to say that Wells made a mistake, James. I don't even want to say he left his neck out there because he didn't. Carlston Harris just has lanky enough ass arms to somehow sync up a Darce or an Anaconda on a man who should be too broad for any human being to pull that move off on. And he was asleep in 4 seconds. It was one of the quickest submissions we've ever seen. The squeeze on Carlston Harris, absolutely incredible. So I don't know how much stock we should really feel Wells lost. He didn't take any damage. He didn't get knocked out, so he's not going to be easier to finish now. He got submitted. He went to sleep. It happens, and it's one of the most freakish submissions we've ever seen in our lives. So I understand why people are going to be high on him coming into this spot. Max Griffin, though, at 19-10, at 38 years old, is still just a guy you can't look past. Like, he might be 1-2 in his last 3 fights. However, he went extremely close with Neil Magny, who just proved he still got it. They went to a split decision, and he went a full 15 with Michael Morales. Morales might be hot off the presses, but we all think that kid, the sky is the limit. So for him to go the full 15, not get knocked out, not get hurt, and have his moments in that fight where he kind of showed the young kid the ropes a few times, he was very, very apparently still with it in that spot. And prior to that, he was on a 3-fight win streak, right? Like, this guy is still absolutely got it. And he's a tough out for anybody. I kind of have to lean dog or pass from a betting perspective. You've got Jeremiah Wells at -170, Max Griffin plus 142, the underdog. And the reason I say that is I could just see this being a very tightly contested split decision. Griffin's got a 69% takedown defense rating, which for how long he's been in the UFC and the people that he's fought, that's pretty damn good. And I mentioned Wells is not the most technical wrestler. Maybe he gets him to the ground, but I'm not convinced he'll be able to. And I think Max Griffin is the better striker. Now, the one time, James, that I straight up was like, you know what? I know a guy who's going to stuff the takedowns, and he's tough and he's durable enough to strike with this guy, and I think he'll have the advantage over 15 minutes. Court McGee got nuked in the first round by Jeremiah Wells. That memory is fresh and painful in my brain. So I don't know that I'm rushing to the window to lay it with Max Griffin. He's been knocked out once in his entire career. He's never been submitted. So another guy who's really, really tough to put away. But I've said this before, and Jeremiah Wells caved the dude's head in. So I'm not in any rush. I'm going to say dog or pass, but I haven't yet decided if I want to go ahead and take that move. My guy Mushroom shouting out that I absolutely take any advantage to bet against Philly Gracie. Mushroom, your Eagles had a shot. Right. I finally decided to give Philly a chance, and I bet on your Eagles, and they let me down. Never again. Never again. Just me versus Philly all day. James, what are you doing here, my man? What do you like?
Well, I'm drinking some water. Got to stay hydrated, like Dustin Poirier says. But Jeremiah Wells, Max Griffin, interesting fight, right? I kind of feel like they're kind of the same fighter in the sense of like they've been hovering around the rankings, like trying to get in there, and they just haven't made that leap, and they've had some setbacks. You mentioned Wells' last fight. So I spoke to both of these guys. I spoke to Wells a couple weeks ago, got some insight there. He kind of feels like it was a mistake in the fight where he's just lost a bit of, had a bit of a lapse in that one and ended up, getting finished in that fight. But obviously that halted a pretty good winning streak for him there. But he feels like he's still got a lot left. Feels like Max Griffin's a great opponent for him, a good name in the weight class. Like, he likes the fact that not only is he getting to fight Griffin, who's like a good name, but also, you're getting a guy who's like a veteran as well. So it's kind of going to be a good test for him. And we know that Jeremiah Wells trains at that really great camp over there in Philly with, Sean Brady and Pyfer and all those other guys. So should be interesting to see how he performs, on this card. And then Max Griffin, I just spoke to today. Now, one thing Max reminded me of, this is the last fight on his contract. And you talked about his age. I mean, this could be it, right? If he doesn't get this done, this might be the end of his UFC career, maybe be the end of his MMA career. I don't know. He never mentioned retirement. He certainly seems like he's had a lot left in the gas tank, so to speak. But this is a big fight for him. He's got to win. Obviously, the UFC likes him. They've given him a number of contracts. They like his fight style. But that's one thing to keep in mind in this fight that, pressure-wise, and, I asked him, obviously he's going to be like, no pressure. But it's got to be in the back of your head, right? He's got a family. Like, you got to think, this is a pretty big opportunity here there as well against Jeremiah Wells. Another thing with Max Griffin, brought in a wrestler. Can't remember the guy's name, but like an outstanding wrestler. So worked a bit on that this camp, but his camp has primarily been MMA Gold with Jim West and obviously Anthony Hernandez and those guys, and then training over there at Team Alpha Male and getting some coaching there. So a little bit of and also a different corner as well. I know he's got Joey Rodriguez, I think, is in his corner for this fight as well. So we'll see if some of the changes that he's done in camp is going to pay off here. I'll tell you the play I like in this fight is the over. I don't think we're going to see a finish. I think this is going to be an all-out war. I know Wells has been finished. I know you mentioned Griffin not finished that much, but I just see these guys as kind of even as far as their skill set. I give a slight edge to Wells just because I think he's look a little bit more impressive. But I could see this fight hitting the scorecard. So I'll be looking for the over, and I'll be looking for the fight goes the distance. Watch some finish happen to me, like eat my words. But I really feel like this is a fight that could end up going the distance, with it being one of those fights where there really is no loser in terms of them entertaining the crowd. So I'm expecting a slugfest here. Give a slight edge to Jeremiah Wells, though.
Okay. I can definitely understand that. I think I'm on the other side as far as a bet is concerned.
Perfect. We're going against each other early. That's good. Otherwise,
we're getting it out of the way. Hey, I got to tell you, James, last week, me and my guest basically just patted each other on the back and agreed left and right the entire show. And I had the worst betting night of the year. I got absolutely destroyed, blasted. So even if we end up going back and forth a little bit,
someone's going to look good at the end. Yeah, exactly. For sure.
All right. Next fight up, you got Devin Brown Bear Clark taking Marcin Prachnio. Now, right after talking about a fight that I like, right after talking about guys that I'm excited to watch compete, we get this one. James, these guys, again, you guys know me. I'm trying to bring you an entertaining show. I want to be a little funny. I respect every single fighter that gets in the cage. But, James, I have both these men marked as fades. These are the bottom of the barrel for this weight class, in my opinion. You've got two guys that are barely clinging to life with a roster spot, in my opinion. Devin Brown Bear Clark, he's essentially a 500 fighter. He's winning and losing every other fight. Every single time he's not fighting somebody who's either brand new to the division or fighting somebody who's old and decrepit, he's losing. And he is 33 years old. He's a little undersized for the weight class. He can kind of wrestle. His boxing decent. Power's not great. Wins over guys like Minifield, Knight, and Jung. I mean, the Minifield one you can't be too upset at these days. He seems to have kind of turned his career around a little bit. But he is like the entry-level gatekeeper to the UFC at this point, in my opinion. And then Marcin Prachnio at 16-7. This guy, he's actually a decent striker. But, James, he's a complete class cannon. Like, he's almost the opposite of Devin Clark in this spot, where he's probably the cleaner striker, but he has to watch his chin at all times because just even the slightest cool breeze will knock this guy out. Vitor Petrosyan in his last fight felt so little fear when facing this man that he was like, you know what? I'm going to go get my first ever submission, because he just knew at any point in time that he could wreck this man. If he ever got in trouble grappling, punch him in the face and it's over. So he took advantage of that and worked on his ground game live in front of a crowd of people. That's disrespect to the maximum, if you ask me, my friend. So if you're making me pick between these two, it's a rock and a hard place. It's a quote South Park. It's what a douche and a shit sandwich. Like those are my choices here. I am gonna go with Devin Clark. I do think he's even though he's a little undersized, he's a little younger. It looks like he's moved out to elevation, which is a move I do tend to like for him. And if his hands are like we've seen in the last couple of fights, I mean, he hurt Kennedy Nzechukwu in his last fight prior to, the Kennedy fade, where he turns around, everyone thinks he's out on the feet, and then suddenly he steps on the gas and has a glorious comeback like he's known for. Other people may not be able to pull that off, and certainly somebody with the durability issues of Marcin Prachnio, I don't think will be able to pull that off. So I think if Devin gets inside boxing range, he should kind of have his way, and I think he finds the chin. I actually think that Devin Clark might get a spectacular knockout come Saturday.
So a couple things on Devin Clark. Did speak to him as well. And by the way, you can find all my interviews on. I always put like an event playlist on my YouTube channel. You can find all the interviews there. So Devin Clark spoke to him. Really good stuff. Last fight on his contract as well. So again, big fight for him. He's got to go out there and perform. And I think this is a winnable fight for him. But I'm with you. Like a lot of unpredictability. One thing I'll kind of push back on you on though. If you look at his losses, and I know you mentioned older fighters. Pretty much every fighter he's fought that he's lost to is ranked for the most part, other than Kennedy. Like even Kutalaba was ranked. You got Blachowicz. You got Rakic. These aren't bad losses, right? Like Anthony Smith, like you could argue that, well, you definitely can argue that Clark has fought the better opposition, right? So, while maybe his wins have not aged so well, it's not like he's losing to, unranked guys in the weight class. So that's one thing I will give Clark a little bit of credit for, but it's just the inconsistency to me that really, and I'm sure you feel the same way, where it's like, do I bet him or do I not? Because there's, like the Kennedy fight's a prime example. Like that was a winnable fight for him. He was looking good early, made a mistake, more than a mistake, and then obviously getting finished in that one. So that's something for me that I can't really put a lot of stock in. I will not be betting this fight, but I think Clark should win this. If he doesn't, then it might be a sign that, hey, maybe he isn't, deserve a UFC roster spot at this point. I think personally, the UFC's given him a bit of a, not a layup, but a good opportunity here for him to go out there and look good. And, he's got his other teammate on here, Zach Pauga. Like this should be a good scenario for him. He's had lots of time, lots of, really good camp, all that. And by the way, he's been at Elevation for, I think, a couple of years now. Like he left Jackson Wink, I want to say like 2 years ago, and made the switch out there. And it's only because he knew, I think he knows Curtis Blades. They used to have the same manager. So that's sort of the connection there, how they ended up training at Elevation. But I think he wins, but no bet for me on this fight. Just totally staying away. Don't even have like a prop either. I just think it's one you sit back and enjoy.
Yeah, the bet is tough because Devin Clark is minus 220 now. So it makes it really tough when you're looking at a guy who's been inconsistent, a guy that you can't really trust. He absolutely should win this fight, James. It's exactly what you're saying. This is a spot that's kind of primely set up on a platter for this man to go out there and get a win. But it is so hard to trust him. And at that number, I don't know that I can pull the trigger on him. Let me check real quick here and see what we're looking at as far as props. I got to go to Bet Online and see. They sometimes have the numbers out for us this early, but not always. Devin Clark by KO is only plus 350. Kind of a gross number, but like I said, if I was going to do anything, that would be the way that I would look. That way you can get a little bit more to kind of sink your teeth into there. I'm in the business of fading the chin of Marcin Prachnio every time I get a chance to, and especially considering that Devin Clark probably does need to kind of show out in this spot, and you don't really want to play with fire. Like I'm talking a little bit of trash on Marcin Prachnio. However, he's got some nasty leg kicks. He's got some decent power of his own. It's not a guy you want to play with. So I could see Devin going out there and kind of trying to get business done. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
All right. I like it. Okay. Here we go. Ladies event here of the evening. Loma Lookboonmee takes on Bruna, Brasil. A very, very interesting fight to talk about here. And I will be honest with you guys. The very first thing I did when I saw I needed to research this fight, I reached out to my guy JHK. I was like, yo, you always have an interview with Loma leading up to her fights. I need to know the skinny. And he's like, he couldn't get one this time around. Apparently, Loma has left Bangtao Muay Thai and she is moving to Canada to start her training up there instead. Exactly.
We're in Canada. Well, I mean, that's like saying, hey, I'm training in the US. Like where do you know where in Canada where she's trying? That's interesting. I'm trying to even think.
The name of the gym.
You know what? I'm going to go look up her Instagram right now. I bet I can figure out where it is.
We'll see, that's the funny thing. I couldn't figure it out by the Instagram. Okay. The name of the gym is Diaz Sports Academy.
Oh, where is that? I'll just click on the thing here. Anyways, keep talking. I'll figure it out while you're doing this. So
I didn't even talk about the skill sets or anything like that. I didn't even talk about like the breakdown or anything like that. But I wanted to let you guys know that that's a thing that's happening here, and it just already makes me scratch my head a little bit because she was so invested in Bangtao Muay Thai, and she's done so well at Bangtao Muay Thai. I find it very odd. I don't know what happened. Obviously, things change, relationships change, people change. I don't know what happened. But I'm wondering why she's leaving Bangtao Muay Thai when she's done basically everything with them since the beginning, and it all looked like it was going well. I'm a big believer if it's not broke, don't fix it. I know you do need to spread your wings and, get different looks, and cross-training is great, but the fact that she, left is like, oh, shit. Now, it does look like she did a little bit of work over here at the MMA lab leading up to this fight, which I love. You guys know I'm a big fan of the MMA lab and what they do, and especially someone who's a striker, a Muay Thai fighter, getting a more grappling heavy look is definitely something that we like. We actually called the submission prop. I think we hit 13-1 on Loma last time because she put the backpack on Elise Reed and choked her out. The grappling is something that she's been working very, very hard on. She went from being a clear and complete Muay Thai striker to being a well-rounded mixed martial artist and somebody who very much is looking to be able to do everything. She's been threatening submissions and hasn't been able to get them. She finally sunk one in, got the win there by sub in her last fight. Looking good. Love everything that we're seeing from Loma Lookboonmee in that type of a situation. But this is a completely different fight, James. Her opponent is somebody, Bruna Brasil, who is 1-1 coming off of Dana White's Contender Series, and she's huge, okay? One of the big things I've always talked about with Loma is, as much as I'm a massive fan of her style, she's one of the most technical, skilled fighters you'll ever see, especially talking Muay Thai. She does have some big tree trunk thighs that kind of makes up for it, but she's small, James. She's a natural 105er. The UFC doesn't have an atom weight division. That's where she would fight if they had one. At 115, she is severely undersized, and she's been able to make it work for her against people that she was kind of similar size with, or maybe people less on the physicality side of things. Or one of the big things she does is the Muay Thai style, like trips and dumps and stuff like that. Her last opponent, Denise Gomes, had a real hard time with that. Loma was able to find her way to top position because of those trips, because of those dumps, but they're also very similar in stature. So it was like an off balance thing that she could take advantage of. Brasil is massive. She is so tall. She is so long. I don't know if those same trips and dumps are really going to work against her. She'll be able to do that third leg pogo stick thing where she's got those long arms that she can put on the mat to kind of keep herself upright. She's going to be difficult to take down using that same style trip takedown. I do think the leg kicks are going to be there. That's one thing with Bruna Brasil. She does not look like she defends leg kicks very well at all. And she does look like she's got that, we've talked about it before, kind of the slow reload thing. She's so tall. She's so long. Yes, she can hit you at long range, but if you can get inside on her, she just can't quite get her hands back as quick as she would like to. So Loma should be able to go to the body lock if she wants to. Loma should be able to get inside and use her hands if she wants to. And that lead leg is going to be there to get beat up all night. Skill for skill, James. I have got to pick Loma Lookboonmee, and I really wanted to, and I actually thought I might bet her. I thought I might parlay her. I thought I was going to love her. And she then gives me the news about switching gyms, and it looks like she's not in great shape. I hate to say it, but like looking at her Instagram, she doesn't look as clean of shape as she was in her previous fight. I want to see her on the scale at weigh-ins before I make any kind of judgment, but it's one of those things where a lot of life changes, moving gyms, and if you're not as motivated, if you're not as in shape, that's a concern for me, especially when you've got someone who finally, I think, might be able to take advantage of the size discrepancy. I've been waiting for the moment to show up, James, where someone finally was going to be big enough for it to make a difference in the fight, and I'm worried this one might be it. I want to root for Loma. I'm a big fan of her. I love her style. I love her personality. I want to see her win, and I also like making money on her. But I actually am kind of leaning dog or pass at this number because of some of the X factors leading up here into this fight. And I actually think I kind of like violence almost. They've got the total is set disgustingly. Under 2.5 is plus 150. That's not enough to sink my teeth into. I was hoping it was going to be a bigger number than that. But Loma's ground and pound is so nasty. And the fact that she's rounding out that submission game, she obviously has some finishing upside. But taking on somebody at this size discrepancy with the kind of power and kicks that she has, available to her, I actually think Brasil might be able to kind of hurt Loma from the outside.
Interesting. A lot to say there. Okay, so I checked this out. I knew the gym sounded familiar. She's in Vancouver. She's where I live. And just a little like quick thing if you want to look into like the distance and stuff. Vegas is only 2.5 hours from here, a flight. Like people forget that. It's not that far away. So like it's not like she has to come all the way from, somewhere far as traveling and stuff. And I looked at her on the Instagram post. She's been there for at least 6 weeks. So that's good. Okay. I mean, it's not like she just did this switch like a week ago and she's got a fight. Like again, short flight to Vegas. She's in Vancouver. I was trying to remember who actually trains there. I know Angela Lee came in for like a seminar or something, but anyways, like that's like, I'm not really sure who trains there, but I know there's like a couple regional prospects. So that's one thing to think of. But look, I mean, I'm a numbers guy, right? The two things that stand out to me are this: Bruna Brasil, 44% of her wins by decision. Loma, 75% of her wins by decision. The over. That's the way I'm going here. I mean, if you look at it, I know that Loma finished her last fight by submission, but you mentioned there, maybe not looking as good as she could be. I think on paper, she's still the better fighter. I could see this one hitting the scorecard. So kind of like the last fight, couple fights ago, the over and the fight goes the distance. I'll be kind of taking an eye on that. A lot of the women's fights do typically go the distance, but when you got two fighters that typically are hitting the scorecards, that's the way I'm going on this one. And again, Loma, if you look at it here, she was finished in her third pro fight. She's not easy to take out. So if we're thinking of any sort of upset, I could see more happening on the decision side of things. So I'm going to go Loma decision. I'll be looking for that prop too.
Okay. I don't mind that one bit. And that's a good call out there, James, with the travel, the distance, things like that. Good things to note. I might just avoid this one, guys. I can't, I came in thinking I was going to be exceedingly confident here in this spot, and there's a couple things making me not. And that's one thing that I did really well last year is when I felt that little quiver of unconfidence, I passed, and it saved me a ton of money because I always seem to make the wrong decision whenever I feel a little queasy like that. And what I've been doing lately is kind of ignoring that feeling and dropping units the way I did on Saturday. So I think I might just pass on this fight. I'm going to pick Loma to win because she is the more talented, skilled, and well-rounded fighter, but damn, I can't blame anybody for taking that dog shot. I totally understand why you think you've got a live dog on your hands here. And hey, I screwed this up last week, James. I will be looking to live bet this one. I said that about Luana Carolina last week and then watched that fight and just let it sail on down the river. I'm watching this fight for a live bet this week. We'll see if I like what I see, I'll jump in and get a number at that point.
Well, also the scale too. You talked about her being out of shape. Let's look at how she actually looks at the weigh-ins. That would be something else. It's like prime example, Molly McCann last week looked great on the scales. And I was thinking, okay, well, I mean, she was already a favorite, but felt even better about like her getting the win after seeing her weigh in. Cause you never know about switching weight classes, right? At least for Molly last week. So that I was like taking a look at the weigh-ins every now and then.
Absolutely. So. The weigh-ins are so important, and especially if it's one where you're kind of wavering, it can solidify you one way or the other on if you need that extra little bit of push. Completely agree. And I have a show based around that on Friday. You guys know. Make sure you check out the Undefeated with me. Next fight up, you have got, Bolaji Aoki. Bolaji Oki. I'm trying. I'm sorry. He's taking on Damir Hadžović, and this is a Dana White's Contender Series fade spot, James. Now, as you guys know, that's my angle. I should have listened to it last week. It would have gotten us home on a big underdog in Jamal Pogues, but I, for the life of me, will never be betting on Jamal Pogues. Kind of the same thing here. The angle exists, and you've got a guy who's a huge favorite, who's way hyped up coming off Dana White's Contender Series. But, James, how am I supposed to bet Damir Hadžović here? So you've got Damir, who's 14-7. He's 37 years old. I mean, again, not to be a hater, not to be rude. I have enjoyed some of his fights. He's definitely been fun to watch. He's a gas tank type of fighter. Even when he gets tired, he pushes and he gets in front of people and he drops his hands and he wings hooks. And that leads to him either getting clipped and dropped, or it leads to him hurting his opponents. And that he lives and dies by the sword. He's a really entertaining guy to watch fight. However, he's 1-3 in his last 4. And his only wins are coming over guys like Yancy Medeiros and Polo Reyes, like guys that just don't belong in the UFC. I don't know that Damir has ever like truly been UFC caliber, and now he's getting old. So that makes it worse. It's going to make it harder for him to beat people who are UFC caliber. And you've got Oki, who's 8-1 and just captured the hearts of everybody coming off Dana White's Contender Series. Brutal, vicious round 1 finish in his Contender Series fight. And like most Contender Series fighters, they finish most of the people they've fought in their lifetime pretty early. Now, he does have 3 decisions on his record, 2 wins, 1 loss. At least that gives us a little bit of confidence that the kid can go a full 15 minutes. He looks real, James. I know it's like you took Phil Hawes and gave him the super serum. Like, I know we just got rid of Phil Hawes. They just got him from the UFC. But this kid, especially with like the dyed blonde hair, the athletic frame, it's like we just are putting Phil Hawes 2.0 right on into the UFC here for us with this guy. He looks brutal. He looks vicious. He is going to be absolutely a joy to watch. He has a 3-inch reach advantage here in this spot. And I just got to think Damir Hadžović is going to do what he does and provide opportunities for this kid to go off on him. And if he's, legit, he's going to hurt Damir. Now, that kind of gunfight, though, can go the other way. And that's what makes me nervous in this kind of a spot, because you've got a big chalky price tag on a couple fighters that are going to cause a car crash. Do all the signs point to the younger fighter being the one that should get his hand grazed? Yes, absolutely. But minus 295, minus 300, woof. That makes it hard for me to get there with a bet. I'm going to pick Oki, but I'm going to have to look for a different angle to bet this thing. I'm not sure I'm going to have anything on this one.
I'm not betting anything in this fight. Look, if you look a little bit closer at Oki's record, he has not fought great competition.
Yep.
He beat a guy in Contender Series who was 5-1. The guy he beat before that, I don't know if you know, was 8-13. The guy he beat before that was 13-0. But if you look at his record, he's fought a bunch of nobodies too. Like if you dig into his record a little bit more, he's not fighting great competition. And I'm very, very big on this. How many times do we see someone look great on Contender Series? Everyone falls in love with them. Like, yeah, man, great, like, prospect. And then they get that step up in the UFC and they just don't look the same. And that's because of that competition difference. Now, listen, Damir Hadžović, you're absolutely right. Nancy Medeiros has been out of the UFC for a while. Not to mention the fact Hadžović older. He also hasn't fought that much. Like he's fought twice since 2020. Like that's not a lot to feel good about, but this just screams past to me. But we always do this where someone wins on Contender Series and we're really excited about what they can do, but you're not really seeing how they perform on a bigger stage. Yeah, this is a big fat pass for me. Like I don't even think, like maybe you do the fight doesn't go the distance, maybe if you can get a good number on that, but I think even there, I'm probably just going to sit back and watch this one. I'm picking Oki just because I really think that, again, the younger guy should win here. And I think the UFC is strategic in their matchmaking. They're not going to have Damir Hadžović. They're not bringing him in to get a win over some guy who won on Contender Series. They're doing it to see who is going to give us more at this stage in their career. Is it this guy who is he ready for the UFC? Or is it a case of, maybe Damir, he's got something left. I don't know, but I'm going to take Oki, but no bet for me on this fight. Absolutely not.
Yeah, you and me are in lockstep here on this one, James. Oki is absolutely the pick. And I know a lot of people listen to these kinds of breakdowns and they roll their eyes and they're like, well, if you're picking him, you should bet him. Well, it's a bad number. It's not quite that easy. And if you've got a young kid who's a little jittery under the bright lights and they get that adrenaline dump, but Damir Hadžović, who's been there for years now, doesn't have that same problem and they start throwing in the pocket, who's likely to slip up? Probably the young kid. Like it's just one of those sketchy spots where the Contender Series fade angle, James, demands that if you're betting anything on this spot, it's a shot on the dog. I can't get there on Damir, so I'm definitely not going to ruin myself, just like I did last week. I'm going to listen to myself. I'm going to pass this time. I'm not going to get caught holding the bag here. All right. Real quick, everybody, let's pay some bills. We've got none other than Pub Sports Radio. You're right here on Pub Sports Radio. So if you haven't subscribed, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Hit the like button if you could. They give away $100. We give away $100 every single week, every single event. Free sign up, pubsportsradio.com. Pick your fight around method. Every single week, somebody will get 100 buckaroos. Next up, Spectation Sports. If you guys are looking for regional scene MMA, we've seen a lot of rising stars coming from Spectation Sports. They do a lot of really cool, smaller shows that maybe you haven't heard of, and we're getting back into full swing for MMA. Use promo code DIEHARD to get a 20% discount on your subscription to Spectation Sports, and then you can start researching those Dana White Contender Series fighters before everybody else does. Next up, you've got the Sharp app. And let me go ahead and just show you here. One of the coolest things they've got on here is the Proptimizer. This bad boy is, I don't think it's AI generated actually, but it is an automated process where you can go ahead and pick your sport here and it'll pick out the best props, give you a star rating and a built-in edge percentage on it. This thing is going absolutely nuts right now, and people are making piles in this discard using this Proptimizer. Now, nothing really clean here today. These 2.5 star type of props, 1.5 stars. You want to wait until you see 3, 4, and 5 star numbers before you really get too invested. But they're going to help you out with baseball, basketball, NBA, college basketball. They have a Discord. They've got professional bettors that you can tail. Make sure you check out the Sharp app. And last but certainly not least, Bet Openly. Talked to you guys about this one a couple of different times. This is a betting exchange. You're taking the action of another human being out there, but because of that, they're only charging 1% juice. So if you're taking a -110 line on any other sports book on Bet Openly, you're actually getting even money. You're getting plus 100 on that bet. So you're going to save tons of money in this spot. We talked about how Devin Clark is getting up near that $2 range. You can still find him on Bet Openly at -178. And you think, oh, that's great for me. But what about the guy on the other side? That's the best part. It's actually a matching plus 178 on the other side of the bet as well. So both sides of the equation are getting better numbers, which means we're saving money long term. And that is going to be more valuable than any deposit bonus you're getting at any sports book, because the juice that they take from us, frankly, is criminal. Check out Bet Openly. Sign up using my link if you could. Let's all save some money together. And for those of you who are running the gauntlet with me, we're on week 4. And after the podcast, I'm going to tally up the numbers and see who is still alive in our Bet Openly contest. First place $300. Second place, $200. And third place, you get $100 if you successfully run the gauntlet all 6 weeks of MMA. Whoever has the most money profit-wise after those 6 events is the winner, and we're having a lot of fun with that. So if you guys haven't signed up for Bet Openly, I think we're going to do another gauntlet after the end of this 6-week stretch here. So make sure you get signed up so you can be available for the next one, because they're just straight up giving away money for people on the platform if you compete in this thing with me. So there you have it. This is the Die Hard MMA podcast, and I am joined by none other than James Lynch, the man himself. And we're breaking down UFC Vegas 86. So hit the like button, kick your feet back, grab some Fireball and popcorn, and hang out. We got a couple more fights to talk about. You've got Trevin Giles taking on, or I should say welcoming, Carlos Prates to the UFC here. And James, there's a pattern on this card, man. It's a Dana White's Contender Series fade situation. Prates is coming in here as a big favorite, and gosh, they're killing me, James. You know what? These are spots where I'm usually grateful, because it's like they space the guys that I kind of hate out. They space the guys out that I really don't want anything to do. And I can kind of just gloss over that one fight and let's talk about the rest of the card. They're all on the same damn card this week. Like every single guy that I have circled is like a fighter that I need to stay the hell away from. They're all on this one same card. Trevin Giles, he might just be like straight up my nemesis at this point. I can't, I every time I bet on him, he finds a way to lose. And then when I do try to bet against him, that's when he finally miraculously finds a way to show up. And it's incredibly frustrating. Now, thankfully, we were able to get the wins with Dreykus and, Miles Morales. We knew the Gabriel Bonfim was going to be a spot that we got, but damn, he robbed me on Preston Parsons. Guys, in my opinion, this guy should be 1-5 in his last, 1-4 in his last 5 fights here in the UFC. I don't agree with that split decision over Preston Parsons at all. Thankfully, Preston Parsons got us our money back, in his next fight. So that felt good. But Trevin Giles is a guy that, I don't know, James, like it just doesn't seem like he ever figured it out. Like I feel bad for him. He was a full-time cop, quit the day job. He went full-time with MMA, and it has not turned out well for him since doing that. He is kind of clinging to a roster spot at this point, but it seems like he really should be more successful than he is. He's 31 years old, so he's in the prime of his life. He's got excellent jiu-jitsu. He's a decent wrestler. And honestly, he's got really nice hands. He's a good boxer. So the skill set is all there. And he just can't quite seem to figure it out and put it all together. The biggest thing for me is like the athleticism seems to really take a drain on him. Like he does fade the deeper fights go. And then he just falls apart. Like once he's tired in round 2 and round 3, he's not the same guy. And I know he got chinned by a couple of super prospects, like, Bonfim cracked him and then jumped on the neck, and that's like his signature move. So you can't really hold that one too much against him, but like getting extended, it just never really looks great. Now, these are some monster prospects, right? Like the shine came off of Bonfim, but Morales, we all think the world of him. Duplessis, man's got gold wrapped around his waist. Can't argue much with that. Dolidze, he's got to win somehow, God knows how, over Roman Dolidze. And even though he lost this weekend, he's in the contender circle. So it's a real question mark of where is this guy at? Now, Carlos Prates, 17-6. 30 years old. That is a ton of experience to have at that age. And the thing that just kind of leapt off the page at me here, James, is this level of competition. I know he's looked spectacular in his last couple of fights. I mean, we're talking a ton of round 1 finishes, a couple of round 2s sprinkled in there. Look great on the Contender Series. Big head kicks. Really excellent kicking game. He's super rangy. He's super long. Does a good job from the outside, but he keeps his hands down here at his hips. And I think that's because he can't extend. Like if his hands are up here, he keeps them down here. And has these little winging punches when you get inside of hhis legs. And that's how he kind of backs you off and keeps the distance and keeps his opponents right where he wants them. And that seems to be working effectively. But you've got guys like 12-6, 8-3, 16-9, 7-3-1. Like these are not great prospects that he's beating to write home about. And even some of the guys that he's losing to, the last guy that did get him was like this 4-0 undefeated Ev type of fighter, and he is 8-0, so that one aged really well. But you've got guys, he lost to like a 1-0 guy in 2017 right before that, and I know that was years ago, so hard to hold that kind of thing against the guy. But he's struggling against mid competition, and it does seem like he's super reliant on these finishes. And I just wonder what it looks like when he gets a little extended beyond that against a truly caliber opponent here, James. This is another spot where I can't trust some kid off the Contender Series, getting a giant step up in competition at minus 265. But damned if I'm going to bet Trevin Giles. I really don't want them to make me bet Trevin Giles, but I think plus 215 is maybe a little too much.
I'm betting Trevin Giles.
Oh, he did it. He's going for it.
Because like you kind of talked about it there though, like you look at who he's losing to, like these are like, super prospects. I think it's guys, and I guess this kind of fits the mold as well with Carlos because he's also a fast, like up and coming prospect, but he's also 30. Like it's not like we're talking about a guy who's like in his 20s and like just has that really like big speed edge. Like yeah, he looked good on Contender Series, but again, this is the theme we've been talking about today. It's like you can look good against the competition you're supposed to fight. I'm pretty sure Trevin Giles will beat most of the guys that he's fought as well too. But you look at who he's like he lost to Dracus. Big deal. Dracus is the champ in a different weight class. Like that's not bad, Bonfim, I think there's a lot of potential there with what he's going to be doing. Preston Parsons ended the Leeds A fight. They were both fights that were close. I mean, if you go look at MMA decisions, it's actually down the middle, like as far as how people pick those fights. So I remember watching thinking that Preston won, but again, it was close. It wasn't like a robbery or anything. I just think it's a case of, again, people being like, oh, Giles last fight got finished, all this, but they're not really looking at necessarily who he's losing to. I think he's too well-rounded for Prates, and I just think that, again, you're getting him at almost plus 185 is what you're getting him at. That's not bad. So I might throw a little bit on him. I'm picking him to win. I just think that this is a case where people are, falling in love with a Contender Series winner and not looking at a guy who's fought some pretty decent opposition throughout his career. And I think if you're comparing the two, because they're only a year apart in age, Giles has had the more accomplished MMA career. He just has. It might not be as successful in terms of wins and losses, but he's been in there with better guys. I got to go with him here. I mean, we're getting a 30-year-old Contender Series winner. That's not good. Like it would be different if this guy was younger and there's still that room to see like maybe he'll be a different fighter. What you see is what you're getting. He's a great striker. Not to mention the fact that Giles is typically losing in a lot of cases. He got submitted in his last fight, did get knocked out by Duplessis. The Morales fight, actually, if you remember, Giles actually threw a couple nice shots early too.
Yeah.
And then it was like they got in a firefight and he ended up losing the firefight. But I think overall, I just don't think like it's going to be a case of where you're going to see Prates go out there and submit him. 18% of his wins are by submission, 71 are by knockout. I think Giles is durable enough that he won't get finished in this case. I'm going Giles here. I know it's not a popular pick. I know people are going to tell me, oh, what are you talking about? Giles is washed. We'll find out on Saturday, won't we? Let's see.
And James, were you able to hear that? I don't know if the microphone picked it up enough. But my dog is barking.
There you go. So yeah, your dog's agreeing with me here.
I don't know if you guys listening to the show heard it. And not only was she barking, but she like attacked me and came over and like jumped on me here. Ugh. So as you guys know, over Christmas, we lost our boy Link. This is Zelda. And she's usually the quiet one of the bunch. So Link was our boy that helped us make picks and barked at us whenever a dog was live or something like that. And he howled anytime we won a bet. This one keeps her mouth shut more often than not and just loves to like lick people in the face. So that's not normal. For her to be barking in the background is not something that we commonly see. And I hate to do it. I absolutely hate to do it, James. But that seals it. The dog of the week.
The dog was the difference. Yeah, there you go.
The dog was so talking it through with you first and foremost, and then the fact that she's going nuts. And one thing that we've done since Link passed away is the Link Memorial Dog of the Week. We are 2-1 on these picks. And I got to tell you, it's the Dana White Contender Series fade, which is my own angle, which I've said when that occurs, you're either betting the dog or you're passing. And the fact that I'm sitting here tempted and just personal bias against Trevin Giles, don't want to pull that trigger, but I'm saying the number's too wide. One of the things I've said for a long time, James, is that sometimes the best bets are the hardest ones to make. And this is one I don't want to make. Like, I simply do not want to click and put my hard-earned money on Trevin Giles at this point. I kind of have to. After going through it, after everything, and especially the little kick in the ass from Zelda with the bark, we got to do it. We're going to go ahead and risk the record falling to even at 2-2 here. But we're going to rock with our boy Link and our girl Zelda. We're going Trevin Giles, Link Memorial Dog of the Week. And I'm going to bet that right after we get off the podcast. Holy crap. I can't believe I just said that. What a day. What a time to be alive. Next up, we've got Rodolfo Vieira taking on Armen Petrosyan, James. This one's fun. This one's really fun. rebooked fight. We talked about this fight a couple of months ago, and I'm glad they kept it together. Really interesting. It seems to have lost a little bit of its spice. I don't know if you noticed, James, but this was one of the most hotly contested fights on Twitter. Everybody and their mother had a side. Everyone was up in arms. Everybody liked somebody. And now it's just kind of floating out there. It gets rebooked, and everybody is like, nobody seems to really care all that much about it now that it's been put back together. And I will tell you, usually when this happens, it's a situation where they absolutely nuke the lines. Like somebody figures out real quick if they were on the right side or not on this one because the bookies reopen it, and it's like $1 difference in the price tag. Not this one. Same exact line we had before. -125 on Rodolfo Vieira, +105 for Armen Petrosyan. For those of you who either don't remember or didn't hear the initial breakdown, I will give you the cliff notes because we've gone in depth about it before, and we don't need to like rehash the whole thing yet again. This one's pretty simple, striker versus grappler. You've got Rodolfo Vieira, who's developed a nice, strong power jab and is maybe one of the most physically imposing fighters we've ever seen here. Not the best wrestler, but the black belt hunter. This man is a jiu-jitsu black belt among jiu-jitsu black belts. Like, you do not want to give him your back. If he gets you to the ground, he will snap you in half. He will take your arm home with him. It's kind of his thing. Armen Petrosyan, I love this guy. He's a high caliber, violent striker who keeps a high pace and just outworks his opponents. And even though he's got a really, really bad takedown defense rating, James, the best thing about him is his get-up game. You look at guys like Petrosyan, it's like the comparison I usually kind of make as my go-to here is Jamal Hill. He gets taken down, but he gets up. Like, that's the difference. You can't just keep him on the ground. He knows how to get back up to his feet, and then you've got to work to get him down all over again. Sometimes that will bite him in the ass because he'll lose a closely contested decision because there was too much ground time. But more so than not, I usually think the striker is the one winning that because the grappler is getting tired continuously trying to take them down, and the striker is the one doing the damage. Like, when they're actually in those short exchanges, they're the one peppering with shots. So unless you're getting 2 minutes of control time on top of them, the damage really should be accumulating and scoring better these days. Kind of what I've noticed. I've been on the Armen Petrosyan side since this fight was booked. I'm staying on the Armen Petrosyan side now. I'm probably going to end up betting Armen Petrosyan before the week is out. I love Rodolfo Vieira. I really do. But I think Armen's got a high ceiling, and I think he can do kind of what Chris Curtis did and just kind of mind his distance and his range and beat him up anytime he gets close.
The interesting thing here is Armen has not lost by submission. So, Vieira is one of his biggest weapons of being able to go out there and listen, anyone can be, finished in a fight, obviously, but that was the thing that kind of stood out to me here as well. Again, kind of keeping with the theme of what we've been talking about today, I like the over here. I don't think we'll see a finish necessarily. I think if Armen wins, it'll be a decision, just with him picking apart his strikes. Armen has yet to get a finish in the UFC. His last finish was on Contender Series. You got Vieira as well, who has been so up and down. I'll never forget that Anthony Hernandez fight. That one it's still stuck in my head. It's like, how did that happen? That you're a jiu-jitsu guy and Hernandez goes out there and just submits him. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was just insane, like doing what you thought would happen, but it was the other guy who did it. I'm not sold. 34 years old. I think what you're seeing is what you're getting with Vieira. He's sort of a fringe rank guy. I think with Petrosyan, he's been on a nice streak. I think I kind of agree with you. He's been a little bit underrated here. With all that said, I'm actually going to go with Vieira in this fight. I do think he'll edge it out. I think he'll get enough of the grappling stuff to potentially win a decision there. The only worry I have is that Petrosyan just keeps us on the feet and he basically outstrikes him and wins. But I think more likely we're going to see this fight hit the scorecards. But I'd see Vieira being the one to slightly edge us out. But you're right. I could see it playing out like the Curtis fight. Like, I went back and forth on this one, ultimately settled on Vieira, but I definitely like the over, and I do think this fight hits scorecards. I don't think we'll see a finish here.
Okay. I don't mind that one bit. And I think that makes sense too, because when you've got a guy that's got to, stay on the feet for his life, usually they're not going to sit down on something that will allow their opponent to like duck under and get a takedown, a body lock, catch a kick, that kind of thing. So yeah, he'll probably just kind of pitter patter poke, outscore him, extend this thing. And we saw Rodolfo, he was able to go ahead and withstand everything Chris Curtis had to offer, some of the nastiest rib roasters you'll ever see. And he talked about it in his post-fight interview. Curtis was like, "Why didn't you go down, man?" And he was like, "I almost did. It took everything he had not to." But that's the kind of like toughness and durability that a black belt can have. And I think that's the kind of thing that, like you said, will carry this thing to a decision. So I'm with you. We're on opposite sides. We both do think that it's going over. Next fight up, Michael Johnson welcomes back Darrius Flowers, welcomes him to a new weight class, though, James. This is where things get interesting. So Michael Johnson, let's talk about him first real quick. Y'all know Michael Johnson at this point. It's weird to have seen this kid on The Ultimate Fighter and to have him be like a fresh baby-faced wrestler, and now he's like a withered veteran of MMA, and he's closing in on a 500 record, believe it or not. Such a weird situation with him. 21-19. I feel like Michael Johnson is the poster boy for potential. Like, on his best night, he's knocking out Dustin Poirier. On his worst night, he's getting decisioned by Artem Lobov, James. Like, there is no higher high and lower low. Like, this guy, you never know what you're getting. He's got incredibly fast hands. He's got good boxing. He comes from a wrestling base, so he should be able to take a lot of people down, control them. You know, the jiu-jitsu training over the years working in MMA. He's now 37 years old, though, and he got knocked dead by Diego Ferreira in his last fight. It's an interesting thing with Michael Johnson where, honestly, James, I think he's peaked. And we could have said that a while ago, but I'm saying I think people are figuring him out now because he started really, really fast in the Diego Ferreira fight. And it looked like he was going to go ahead and maybe even finish Carlos in that spot. And then it started kind of slowing down. And then it started evening out. And then Diego started having some success. And it's like, I think Diego just kind of picked up on like the speed and the pattern. And when he finally was able to kind of sit down on a shot where he knew Johnson was going to be, boy, did he put him down. That was one of the nastiest knockouts I think we've ever seen. And I mean, we're talking legs crossed, curled toes. Like, Johnson was out cold for a good minute. Like, at 37 years old, that could have been a bury me type of knockout, James. I worry about guys getting hit like that and knocked out and then just not quite being able to come back from it. At 37 years old, I'm even more afraid of somebody not being able to come back from that kind of a knockout. Darrius Flowers, 12-6-1. He is another Contender Series fighter. However, he took a short notice fight against Jake Matthews last year. About 6 months ago at this point. He fought Jake Matthews at 170 pounds. This man is pulling the full cannoneer, James. He started at 185 pounds. He fought his UFC debut at 170, and he is now completing the transition to 155. He trains out of the MMA lab, and he's just a little tank of a man. Looks very, very physically strong. He's extremely thick. The fact that he's got the record that he does with some of the wins that he does, and he's been fighting people that are straight up 2-3 weight classes larger than him his entire career and managed to make it to the UFC, like, I think we might have a little something here. Like, he does seem like a very Cannoneer-esque raw potential type of guy that got his shit together a little late in life. And now he's training at a good gym. He's just 29 years old. So he's not even a Cannoneer where he's like knocking on the door of 40. This kid's coming into his athletic prime right now. And I can call him a kid because I am older than him at this point, James. He's got big power. He's physically strong. He's a decent wrestler. He's got good blast doubles, I guess I should say. Not decent wrestler, but like, he does explode on people and like just maul them to the ground. He does a good job of like advancing positions and stuff like that as well. That was something he did to Jake Matthews, where a guy who is as talented on the mat as Matthews and has been in the UFC as long as he has, this guy hit him with a blast double and passed to side control like it was nothing. I mean, he was straight into a dominant position, and he was severely undersized in that fight. Worried just a little bit about the cardio of Flowers. That's something that we have seen, is that he has slowed down in some of his fights. He has kind of lost it a bit. Now, his last fight against Matthews was both on short notice and at elevation. I want to make sure we drive that point home. I was tempted to bet him for the upset in that spot, James, and didn't because of the elevation aspect to it. I simply felt like he was not going to be able to keep it up if he didn't get an early finish. And sure enough, kind of a cup shot, little controversial, but at the start of round 2, he didn't look like himself coming out in that fight. So I want to see him make weight. I want to see him get on the scale at 155, make sure he's okay doing it. But if he can, I don't know why he's the dog. I actually think Darrius Flowers is a good bet this week, and I might be actually jumping on Darrius Flowers in this spot. He's a very small underdog. He was a bit of a bigger underdog earlier in the week. He's plus 105 now, minus 125 on Johnson. And it's the sell point for me, James. We got these changing of the guard situations. I think Michael Johnson's time has come and gone. I don't know if he's going to fight to his potential coming off that kind of a knockout. I don't know if his durability is going to be intact coming off that kind of a knockout. And he is the type of fighter who will let a fight slip away. So even going up against somebody who's got potential cardio issues like Flowers, he might not even be able to step on the gas to take advantage of it. So I think it's a really good fight for Flowers, if I'm being honest.
I'm going the other way here.
Okay.
I like Michael Johnson and a couple of things. So you sort of alluded to it, though, like the fact that he started at middleweight. I mean, I remember when he fought Tim Hiley in the regional scenes. Like, Flowers is a guy I've known about forever. The fact that he's fighting at lightweight, I know he's 29, but that is a bit concerning that he's moving down another weight class. Like, we'll have to see how he looks. Like, that's my biggest concern here. So this is kind of how I think the fight's going to play out. If you're Michael Johnson early, you don't want to get too cute. You don't want to, try and make this like an entertaining fight like he had with Gaethje, because he probably will get knocked out. A guy who used to fight at middleweight, fighting at lightweight now, he's probably got some power. That would be a little bit concerning. But the thing that I look at is, you got Johnson, who's been a mainstay in the weight class. You got Johnson, who's fought far better opposition. And I think you're kind of underselling Diego Ferreira a little bit. This is a guy who's got some power. He's very, very good. I know at one point was in the rankings. Darius Flowers really hasn't proven much other than just getting to the UFC. We can't take anything away from that debut. Short notice against a guy in Jake Matthews is pretty good. Probably, interesting here. But what's interesting is Johnson will have a slight reach advantage and slight height advantage in this fight. So, and it's not like Johnson's coming from a bad camp either. He's over there at Killcliff. Like, I'm sure who he's training with over there. I mean, you look at some of the names that are in that gym, like, he's getting the training he needs, and he's obviously still able to compete at a high level. What I worry is what you just described there, is that Flowers could go out there and get a first round finish. If he doesn't, and it goes to second and third, and I know he was in elevation for his last fight, I'm going to take the guy who's been in the weight class. I'm going to take the guy that's not cutting a ton of weight to get to 155 because he's been in this weight class for so long. To me, I think Johnson weathers that early storm. I think he goes on and wins the decision here. Remember, Jamie Mullarkey, he won that fight, right? In my opinion, anyways. That was a couple fights back. If you look at the scope of his last couple fights, beat Diakaze, should have beat Mullarkey, finished Alan Patrick, and had that huge layoff prior to that with Glida. And even Thiago Moises, he won the first round of that fight. He just made a mistake and Moises submitted him in the second round, but he was looking good early on in that fight. I'm not jumping off of Michael Johnson yet. On paper, he's the better fighter. I think he shows that here. I think he weathers the early storm, gets a decision here, and beats Darius Flowers. But I like your thinking, because I could see that happening too.
Okay, fair enough. Gray in the chat saying this is a good live bet situation. Maybe it is. Absolutely, yeah. Maybe it is. The problem for me, though, is I could see this being, Flowers has a lot of round one fights. Whether he wins or loses, he does have a lot of like quick finish type of situations. I could see this being one that's a bit of a barn burner right out the gates. You may miss your opportunity if you decide to wait for a live bet. And oddly enough, guys, I just got a DM. And when I say just got, I mean like right before I started my breakdown on this fight. Our guy Andrew from Superbook Sports. Yeah, it's not a pay-per-view week, so there's no sharp action report here on this one. Big guy is on Flowers. So the number one MMA gambler who takes action over at Superbook Sports just locked in a bet on Darius Flowers. As always, I'll tell you what I'm doing. You can do with that information as you see fit, but combination of already leaning that way and hearing the big guys on that side, I think I'm probably going to have a taste of Darius Flowers at some point here leading into this week. Maybe we wait for Friday. That's the one hitch, is maybe we wait for Friday and see how he does on the scales. Because as long as he's not like dying on the scales, God, even if he, I hate to admit it, James, but even if he blows it and misses by like 4 pounds or something, that might be okay for us. So, we'll see what happens. I'm not sure if I'm going to lock that in now or sit tight and wait on it, because I think there's going to be a lot of love for his opponent in this spot. I don't think anybody's really rushing to the window to bet Darius Flowers. I've kind of had him circled personally, but I think more people will lean towards Johnson in general. So I don't know that we're going to like miss out on the best of the number. Like, if it's a pick 'em, we're missing out on plus 105, like cry me a river. That's fine. All right. Last couple of fights on the card here, everybody. Next up, you've got Brad Tavares taking on Robocop Gregory Rodriguez himself. This is a fun fight, man. James, Brad Tavares is like the gatekeeper of all gatekeepers at this weight class. He is the dude. Like, Dreykus even went on like a big old spiel about it, that he's like, if the UFC gives you Brad Tavares, that's how they find out whether or not you're legitimate in this weight class. Like, that's the guy you've got to get past. That's the guy you've got to beat here. And Brad, he just always brings it, man. That last fight against Chris Weidman was just chef kiss. Perfect. Beautiful spot to fade a former legend in Weidman. But before that, the legendary durability of Weidman did look like it was a little on the decline against Bruno Silva. Now, we know Bruno Silva throws absolute hammers, James. Dude hits like a freaking truck. I felt like that was just a little bit of an early stoppage, though. I mean, if you run back that fight and you slow it down, Bruno hits him with a big old knee. Like, Brad Tavares is hurt. He is absolutely hurt. He is absolutely wobbled. His back hits the canvas, but there's a shot. You can see, like, right between the ref and Bruno, you can see Brad's face clearly. His eyes are wide. They're focused on his opponent. They're clear. Like, he was hurt and he fell over, but he was not knocked out. So the ref steps in and stops it. Maybe he saved him a couple years worth of, brain cells, because Bruno would have followed up with ground strikes. But I think it was a little bit of an early stoppage. I don't think he was all the way out. Regardless, that was the 4th KO loss on Brad Tavares' record. And I went back and I looked at those knockouts for you guys, because I'm like, okay, is he chinny? Like, is he fading? Edmund Shabazian caught him with a head kick. Like, that was back in the height before we really knew and when round 1 Edmund was a thing. Okay, he got caught. Rob Whittaker caught him in round 1. There's really not much shame in that. Rob Whittaker's an absolute beast. And then back in the day, he got knocked out by Tim Boesch back in 2014. If you guys don't remember Tim Boesch, it was like if you had me in the cage with Ngannou's power. Like, that was Boesch. Like, he had just barely enough wrestling to survive and keep the fight on the feet. And then he just haymakered people. That was his whole thing. So Tavares getting knocked out by those guys, I don't really want to say is, too much of a red flag or a problem or anything like that. But he is getting older. He is a guy who goes 15 minutes. He's a decisionator. So he takes a lot of damage. The wear and tear on his body, definitely going to be a thing. I'm not ready to bury him yet, though. He's training out of Extreme Couture. I love his well-rounded game. He's constantly keeping a high pace. I've lost so much money betting on this man to finish people in round 3 because he just paces people so much that I feel like he should be able to finish them. I almost cashed that ticket against Omari Akhmedov. He's a well-known gasser and somehow barely survived that 3rd round just to rob me. So I've kind of given up on the round 3 finish here from Brad Tavares, except I think I made that bet against Weinman still. We'll see here this week against Gregory Rodriguez, because this man, 31 years old, in his prime. James, I do have questions about his chin just a little bit. He's been knocked out 3 times. I know Bruno's a beast, but that was like a freaking jab that put him down and knocked him out. The Chidi and Jaquani fight, though, he got his head split in half. You could see his skull under there, and he never slowed down. The Dennis Lulian fight, that guy's got no ground game, but he 8 shots coming in there and still did the damn thing. The one that always I got to talk about and worries me is the Jung Young Park fight. A guy who's not really a finisher unless he gets your neck. He was boxing Gregory up. He had him wobbled. He had him hurt. And it wasn't until he got just a little over aggressive and Gregory said, okay, enough of this, bink, and put him down with one big shot that it was finally over. But he was on skates in that fight. I worry a little bit about the chin of Gregory Rodriguez. He's so big for this weight class. I think that cut doesn't help him, but he always manages to seem to just kind of push through and keep going. And of course, he's got that nasty ground game. I think he passes the test, James. I really do. I think this is a spot where Gregory Rodriguez probably does enough. And with Brad Tavares, if he is kind of chink in the armor, falling apart maybe a little bit, this is the type of guy that'll finish you. He can do it with his hands. He can do it on the mat. He really can finish however he wants to in there. Price is a little bit wide yet again. And I know I've said that for 2 weeks, guys. I'm sorry. That's just the way the cards are built these last couple of events. You saw dogs barking last week. That holds no bearing on this week. Maybe all these short favorites that are maybe a little undeserving come through this week. That, it's like spinning roulette out here sometimes the way that works. So you saw dogs barking last week. Don't expect them to necessarily come through this week. But I think Gregory Rodriguez probably is rightfully favored. Maybe not to this extent, but I think he should get the win, James.
Yeah, I like Rodriguez here too. You talked about his chin, and I thought about that too. But you know the last knockout win that Brad Tavares had, do you? Do you know it off the top of your head? 2018. It was against Krzysztof Jotko. He's not a finisher. He's just not. Like, not recently anyway. So it's not really something I think Rodriguez has to worry about. I think he can go in there, kind of be a little bit reckless if he wants to, because he's fighting a guy that, really he doesn't have to worry about that about. And, listen, I think Tavares is unfortunately just taken so much damage in his career. I mean, this guy was on The Ultimate Fighter, like, however long ago that was, and he's still in the UFC. Like, I don't even know from that cast who's even still in the UFC, let alone, even the seasons after that. Credit to Brad Tavares. He's fought the who's who, but this is Rodriguez's fight to lose, in my opinion, unless he does something really dumb. But I just don't see him getting knocked out here. And I think he probably goes out there and possibly finishes Tavares. I mean, you mentioned the Bruno Silva fight. I mean, I agree with you. I think that was a bit of a questionable stoppage. And this is a guy who went the distance with Duplessis, and we know that he's got finishing power too. So, I don't know. Like, I'm probably just going to stay away. Like, minus 275 or whatever whatever you're getting for Gregory Rodriguez, minus 240 you're getting for Rodriguez. I don't know. Like, he should win, but I'm also like, you know, I'm not like super like this is guaranteed going to happen type thing, but I'll pick him here. But I don't see a lot of value because, again, I could see Tavares taking a lot of good shots and somehow going the 3 rounds too. So that's why I'm a little hesitant to lay down the knockout prop on that one. That would be one area I would look at to bring down the juice a bit. But I think I'll just pick Rodriguez and no bet for me here.
Yeah, man, that is kind of the same boat that I'm in, is that I'm going to pick Gregory Rodriguez to go ahead and get the win here. But I almost want to say dog or pass from a betting perspective. Like, I know you guys hate that, but realistically, we're talking with numbers here. You know what I mean? Gregory maybe wins this fight, but I wouldn't be at all shocked if I jump in live because Gregory looks like he's slowing down and Brad's like hitting him with the jab and hurting him midway through the second round. I could absolutely see that happening as well. Brad's not someone that you want to bury here in this spot. Dirty Reg in the chat says, Brad got some momentum after handling the over-the-hill Wyman G-Rod's another story. Brad couldn't hold up against Bruno's heat, won't hold up against G-Rod's either. And that I can understand. If you're getting cracked by Bruno, who does also seem to kind of maybe be getting maybe to the end of his run here, prime Gregory Rodriguez probably hits about as hard. So I absolutely could understand that. Our guy Real Deal Prime in the house, wrestling rules. And I assume that's in favor of Gregory Rodriguez there, Real Deal Prime, because Brad Tavares is not known much for his wrestling, I wouldn't think. So I would assume our guy is on G-Rod as well. Next fight on the docket, Ihor Potieria comes in on short notice, filling in here to take on Robert Brejcik, I believe. I know they say the Z weird. Maybe they don't. It's like a silent Z. It might be Brejcik or something along those lines. I listened to the announcers during his fight, James, and I still just don't. I'm not good with my Polish. Okay, big fan of Jan Blachowicz. Not good with my Polish pronunciation, so I do apologize to all the children of Poland out there that are screaming at their TVs since I cannot roll the tongue the right way on that name. Interesting fight with Ihor Potieria dropping a weight class here. We know the duelist is someone very, very glass cannon-y. 1-3 in his last 4 fights since the Contender Series. His UFC run has been rough. His only win was spoiling the show against Mauricio Shogun Rua when he was in Brazil. But the other names on his resume, just a bunch of tough outs here, James. Rodolfo Bolato, Carlos Olberg, and then even Nikolai Negumereanu. Like, I know people don't think much of him, but he's a tough son of a bitch. Like, he might not be the most talented or skilled fighter in the world, but he's durable as shit. And when it comes to these two guys, that's what you need. Durability wins, because Ihor is skinny. He is tall, he is lanky, and he is fast, James. And that's what got Rua. Rua got caught by a shot he was just too slow to react to. This dude's hands are incredibly quick, but he can't take the power coming back. My big question here is dropping from light heavyweight to middleweight. How does that help and or hurt him? Because he had a big speed advantage up at 205, and it seemed like that's what he did his work on the regional scene using. Didn't hold up in the UFC. Coming down to 185, is he going to have a speed advantage? Is he going to be more fragile because he's cutting more weight? That would be the thing I'd be concerned with, is that he's even more fragile down a weight class. But if he keeps that speed, there's a chance 185 could maybe be the home for this guy. Now, Robert, 17-5, just a brick shithouse. This guy reminds me a lot of Duplessis as far as like really herky-jerky striking. He's got a nice jab, James. He's got a really nice power jab. Looks like he works well behind it, and he throws it out there constantly. That thing sets up his entire offense, and then he hits really freaking hard. He's got a fadeaway left hook that he likes to hit people with as they come in. And then he also has a really quick right cross that comes kind of hammering at people. But he's so fraudulent with the people he's been fighting lately. I mean, he's 17-5 and, again, 33 years old. Another guy who's super old for making his UFC debut. He's got a lot of hype behind him. But this 5-fight round 1 knockout streak that he's on, 16-5, 28-17. 7-1. That's the best of the bunch. 11-12. 12-7. I mean, like, he's fighting absolute nobodies, and no disrespect meant to Lee Chadwick. The guy is old at this point. It's not a great run. And it's not too long ago he was losing decisions to 6-4 guys. Yes, you heard that right. I don't think he's a very good minute winner, James. I think this guy is kind of a Dreykus Duplessis light. You know, when you say, Mom, can I have some Dreykus? And she says, we have Dreykus at home, honey. This is the guy that you get on your dinner table. So I'm very interested. I'm very interested. This fight is too sketchy with too many questions for me to really have any confidence in any kind of a bet. I think the under probably more than likely is the way to look, but the bookies are on to us. Under 1.5 is minus 260 in this spot. No way in hell am I laying 2-1 on Robert making his UFC debut because he's not from the contender. But this is a contender series fade. Like, it's the same idea. Guy comes out of left field taking on someone with experience. And again, if you gave me bigger money on Ihor, I might be tempted to actually take the dog in this spot, but I don't know if he can take even a jab from this guy. So plus 160 is not enough, James. I don't want anything to do with this fight. Please, unless you know something I don't out there, save your money. Pass. This ain't it. I wouldn't be shocked at all if Ihor is able to like stay on the outside and hit this guy and keep the distance and catch him with something big because he's just not that good. By the same token, Rob can probably just stumble his way forward and land one cross and the fight's over. So I think it's going to be Rob by knockout, but I don't think I'm betting it, James.
Yeah, same thing. I might put a little bit on Rob by knockout, but again, also with him moving down a weight class, like maybe more susceptible to getting knocked out. You never know. I don't know, but you're right. Like you and I are on the same page here. Not great competition. Looks like an easy spot for, Ihor to lose, but again, like he's been in the UFC. He's fought the actual good competition for the most, not even good, but just like UFC competition. Yeah, no, I'm not going to put too much stock into this fight. Like this was a pass for me big time. So melee a little bit on the knockout prop, but that's probably about it.
Okay. And James, you are my, resident hockey fan here that I like to talk about. Love the moves that your Canucks have made. Love the shirt that you're rocking today.
It's a practice shirt. Yeah.
I'm pretty excited though, because there's a McLean right now.
I know he just scored. I saw that.
Kyle McLean scores a goal for the Islanders. And I'm an Islanders fan. Through betting, somehow I got addicted to that team a couple years ago. So I've kind of followed them ever since. So I do always root for the Islanders. And now we've got a McLean on the team who just scored a goal. Like, let's freaking go. Sorry. Got excited there seeing the family name on screen. I think we might be long distant cousins somehow. I don't know. I'm going to have to look into it.
There you go. Yeah.
Man, the next fight up, your co-main event, Dan Ige takes on Andre Fili. Fun fight, James. Really, really fun fight. This is one of those ones where right at home, low-level card, not the biggest names, not the biggest stakes. This is a good co-main event. Both these guys are extremely high level. Both these guys could be in the contender circle. They've both been around for a long time. Fun fights every time they're out. I love this fight. I absolutely love this fight. Dan Ige, James, is very much the ultimate gatekeeper to me, in my opinion. 17-7 and just durable as all get out. Like the guys he has fought and not been finished by: Movsar Evloev, Chan Sung Jung, Josh Emmett, Calvin Kattar. Like, it's impossible to get this guy out of there. The problem for me is he always fights incredibly close with his opponents. Before the Calvin Kattar fight, he won a split over Edson Barboza, one that was very controversial. He got the split over Mirsad Bektik. He's going to decision with everybody. Now, he did kill poor Damon Jackson. So he looks to be kind of getting more in a finishing mood. He's sitting down on his punches more these days. But in general, Dan Ige is kind of let's rock him, sock him for 15 straight minutes type of fighter, and always ends up being in these very closely contested matchups. Makes it a little scary to back this guy. Andre Fili, 23-10, always the bridesmaid with this guy. It seems like every time he gets that step up into the contender circle, it looks like he's putting it together. He just can't quite get over that hump, right? Gets the split decision win over Bill Aljo, barn burner, back and forth fight, almost knocks out Nathaniel Wood, and then gets beat up for 2 straight rounds and loses the decision there. Reminded everybody who the hell he is against Lucas Almeida in the last fight. Big round 1 finish. He also seems to be kind of showing his power in his last couple fights. I mentioned the Wood fight, James. I talked about that one in my breakdown of that last fight, where I was like, dude, anybody but Wood probably goes to sleep there. Like, the shots he hit Wood with were massive. So for him to now come out, get a finish, and he's looking to try to establish himself and finally capture the heights that everyone expected from him when he first got to the UFC. Big time prospect, been around forever, really looking to put a run together, really actually wants to put a stamp on his career. He's motivated here. Very, very intriguing fight. But to me, if you're not legitimately in the contender circle, James, if we're not talking your top 6, I'm backing Dan Ige. That's the side, unless you're somebody who's going to be challenging potentially for a title. Like, I think he's got that kind of skill set. I think he's got that kind of ability. And I do think he mixes his game well enough that Andre Fili will do kind of what he does, get out to a hot start. And then probably the fight gets very close and Ige ends up being the one who gets his hand raised at the end, the deeper this thing goes. Andre Fili has been knocked out 3 times over the course of his career. And while that's not an easy thing to do, again, I think Dan Ige is kind of coming for blood in some of these situations. I wouldn't be shocked if he tries to finish this one before it gets to the final bell, believe it or not. So I'm going to be on the Ige side here. He's about a minus 170 favorite. Again, I hate the number. It's a little too much. People got to that Ige number before I did, so it was shorter earlier in the week. You could have paid less for it. I hope some of you got in on it if that's the side that you like. I'm debating whether or not I want to pay the 175 or if I want to see if maybe I can get a better number line, James. I'm picking Dan Ige, but if it's a close competitive first round, maybe I can get closer to a pick'em line live as this fight gets going. I'm not sure how I'm going to approach it from a betting perspective just yet, but I'm on the Ige side.
Spoke to Ige back when he was fighting Lerone Murphy. But again, like good insight into his camp. Obviously disappointing fight there with Bryce Mitchell and looking to rebound in a big way. But I just feel like Ige and Fili are kind of in the same boat, but I feel like Ige's like at least been in the rankings and he's fought those ranked guys, where with Fili, it's like he's always trying to get into the rankings and he can't seem to do it. He has some misstep or whatever. He has like a close fight. Like I'm with you, Ige 100% here. Like I just think that, I kind of described him today on my show as like kind of, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but I mean this in kind of like, he doesn't really excel in any particular area, but he's good everywhere. He's like Marvin Vettori kind of, like Vittori's like an all-around good fighter, but he can't do anything special. So when he gets that step up, it doesn't like, he can't do anything, right? Because it's like everyone's kind of figured it out. Dan Ige's kind of the same way. Like he has a couple knockout wins, which are great, but that's not typical for him. Typically he does go the distance if you look at a lot of his fights, and he's just like a hard-working, like lunch pail type fighter. He's also never been finished, so you don't have to worry about that, and not that Fili's much of a finisher anyways. Ige decision. Like, I mean, that's probably how this is going to go. He might knock him out, but I don't like. I think despite the damage that Fili's taken and being in the sport for so long, and remember he kind of just grew up in the UFC. Fili did. He's been in the UFC forever, but I think more likely an Ige decision is probably the way to go here. But I could also see like Ige just doing like Gavin Tucker and just going out there and finishing him in the first round too. I could see that happening as well. But I think most likely Ige wins the decision here.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, James. I'm right there with you, and I might be tempted in like a round 3 sprinkle type of situation, because I do think that's where Fili does tend to start a little hot, and then he does tend to slow down over the course of the fight. I think that's where you'll get the finishing edge, is as Ige kind of starts to take over in rounds 2 and 3. But more than likely, it's going to end up being a decision, because that just tends to be the way that this guy fights. He's not over aggressive. He'd rather take the win than be too flashy or anything like that. So I'm kind of with you there. More than likely decision, but could definitely see a late finish as well. Mushroom saying Ige is 7 and in 7 decisions. So yep, definitely when it goes all 15, he knows what he's doing there. Oh, he's saying 8 and 7 after this weekend. Oh, Mushroom calling for the upset. All right, we'll see, buddy. We'll see. All right, everybody. Main event time. We got 160 of you rocking live with us. If you haven't already, please do me a favor and hit the like button. Follow my guy, James Lynch, best interviewer in the game. You're going to find out a lot of really cool information listening to this guy and the interviews he puts up on his page. Next fight up. Last fight up. Jack Hermansson takes on none other than Joe frickin' Pyfer. We have heard it forever, James. Be Joe Pyfer. Well, it's time. It's time to be Joe Pyfer, because he is finally in the contender circle. They didn't exactly take him slowly. I mean, Body Bags had a pretty rapid ascent here in the UFC, but they've spaced out his fights enough that I feel like it was pretty well appropriate. And he's gotten a lot of, if you look at his Tapology, he's done a lot of grappling mixed in there. What is there not to like about this guy? I mean, he's a really good grappler, 27 years old. He's a fantastic boxer, and he's got huge power in his hands. I mean, I know you can't trust Dana White as far as you can hip toss him, but he's trying to say that Pyfer's got, harder hands than Francis Ngannou. Dana, get the fuck out of here with that shit. But he does hit extremely hard. This is a very different fight, though. Going from Abdul Razak Al Hassan, a guy who I guess recently maybe wants to wrestle people, but more often than not as a kickboxer striker type, to a Jack Hermansson, who is a very slick striker, who's got great footwork, who made Chris Curtis chase him around the cage and, cut angles, put him in bad positions, made it difficult to touch him. Like, this guy is skilled on the feet. He's got good footwork. He's got good hands. He's got good boxing. And then he's an incredible grappler as well. He's got great jiu-jitsu. People may forget that he heel hooked Kelvin Gastelum. I mean, you're never safe on the ground with Jack Hermansson, and he prides himself on having the best ground and pound in the UFC. Like, if this guy gets on top of people, he is vicious with the way he pounds on people. So do I think Joe Pyfer is going to pass this test? Yes, I do. I do believe that Jack Hermansson is kind of the stepping stone at this point. You look back at the guys that he's been facing, and it's, again, the loss to Roman Dolidze, the loss to Sean Strickland, the loss, they paired him up with Edmund Shabazian, Marvin Vettori, like Jared Cannonier, Kelvin Gastelum. It's the guys that are all just about to break into the contenders circle that face the Joker. He reminds me very much of Brad Tavares, where if you are legit, you get by the Joker. If you're not ready yet, he will handle you and he will show you the door. So it's a very interesting fight to see if Pyfer is ready for this level or not. Personally, I think he is.
I do as well, but I want to warn people, like, this just seems like the typical fight where they're like, yeah, there's no way Jack's going to win. Like, I think Jack will make it interesting. I really do, especially if this fight goes a little bit later, because that's one thing we haven't talked about. Pyfer has not gone 5 rounds. Hermansson has, right? So that's something that you can kind of look at. Now, one thing I've kind of made a note of with Hermansson, because I love Hermansson, great fighter, like, good interview too. I spoke to him earlier today. I guess one little tidbit to know, he's been in Vegas for 10 days. So it's not like he's, needs time to, like, worry about cutting weight and all that different stuff. So he's been, sort of chomping at the bit, and he wanted to come back earlier. The reason he, has been off so long is just, I guess they were waiting to, like, find the right matchup. But I think with Hermansson, I've noticed since he got COVID, not to get too political here, but like, cause people always get weird with COVID, but he does seem to slow a bit. You notice that? Like, I kind of like, even the Edmund Shabazian fight, he kind of got off to a bit of a slow start. And I think that's a recipe for disaster against a guy like Pyfer, who we know is red hot out of the gate. So that's, I'm going to kind of keep an eye on. Hermansson is tough to finish. I think Jared Cannonier is the only guy that I can think of recently anyways that's actually finished him. I guess, no, Dolidze did in the second round, but I mean, like, an early finish like that, that's not typical for him. Actually, that was a second round finish too, the Cannonier one. But kind of the point I'm making is that, like, I don't think it's a slam dunk guarantee that Joe wins this fight. Like, I'm picking him, and we talked earlier about, UFC matchmaking. Like, obviously they want the up and coming guy with this great story who's, flashy and exciting to win. They don't want Jack Hermansson when he's had his opportunity of being a contender, right? And Hermansson's 35. So it's like, obviously if the UFC had it their way, they want Joe Pyfer to win this fight. But I just, like, I want to warn people that, like, I don't think it's like a huge slam dunk, like, that he's going to win. Like, I see a lot of people saying, oh yeah, like, he'll win this and is strategic and all that. I don't know. Like, I think Hermansson, it's not like he was, sitting on the couch for 2 years or a year and a half or whatever it's been since he last fought. He's definitely been in there. He's been training. I know he mentions that he's trained a bit with Yuri as well. So, like, he's getting good training and stuff. It's just a matter of, can he put it together? Because when he's on, he does look good. But the question is he even going to get that opportunity to show that if Pyfer takes him out a little bit earlier? So that's a bit of the concern in the fight there, is, like, I think stylistically, this is a very good fight for Joe Pyfer in this matchup. So I'm taking Pyfer by knockout, but I might also look at, maybe doing some live betting if this fight goes a little bit longer. Because honestly, I think if the longer the fight goes, that does benefit Jack Hermansson. Like, I remember the Marvin Vettori fight. Everyone looks at that and it's like, oh, Vettori dominated him. But what people, I think, forget, remember his eye got busted? He was seeing out of one eye the whole fight. Vettori still couldn't finish him. So that's one thing to kind of keep in mind. It's like, the later the fight goes, this is a guy that can still do something in the fight, right? So that's something I think is worth noting. But yeah, Joe Pyfer, probably second round knockout. That seems to be the theme with the Hermansson getting finished. So we'll go with that.
Yeah. No, I'm right there with you, James. I like it. I think Joe Pyfer is going to be the side. I think he probably does look for some kind of a finish. And I do think it looks like Jack Hermansson's just maybe a little bit here on the decline. You mentioned he has been tough to finish, but man, and I know we've talked about this basically all night tonight, right? You've got the guys coming off Contender Series who are knocking out bums. They don't translate to the UFC level. You can't take a whole lot from that, even though they're impressive before they get here. Kind of the same thing with Joe. Yes, he's finishing these lower level UFC guys, but does that mean he can finish a contender? I think so. Like, he obviously has stupid power, so I'm going to pick him to go ahead and get a knockout at some point. But Joker is the kind of guy that's going to make you work for it. So not necessarily someone who's going to get finished quick and in a 5-round fight. That's an experience gap. You got to talk about the fact that the Joker can dance around the cage. And if Joe slows down a little bit, that's where shit gets sketchy. That's where you start to worry, because this guy can skate around the outside and you could get tired chasing him if you don't get that early finish that you put everything into. So watch closely, hedge your bets live if it looks like that's the way this thing is going. I like Pyfer. I think he's a decent anchor on parlays. And if you're playing narrative street out there, the UFC obviously wants this guy to win this fight. So they're going to put him in a good spot where he should win. Yes, the line is inflated a little bit because the bookies know that. They're not going to give you a freebie. But I think it's a beautiful spot to, like I said, anchor, and you can always pull the shoot live. You know, if you've got a parlay that ends on Joe Pyfer and you're watching the fight, looks like the tide is turning, make sure you lock up some free money. Get out of there. That is UFC Vegas 86, folks. Thank you all so much for being here with me this evening. And James, thank you for jumping in. I do apologize for the miscommunication again, but appreciate you jumping on and talking about these fights with me tonight, man.
Yeah, no, apologies to you. It was my fault. I showed up. I should have doubled, because I saw your tweet and it said 3:30 and I think, oh, you just made a mistake. But then anyways, shout out to my Discord. They were the ones who let me know. Check me out, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, X, whatever you want to call it. Everything's always Lynch on Sports. I doing a couple live streams a week. I always answer questions. I do like the live streams there. I also got all my interviews on my playlist for the event. I've got a whole bunch here. Jack Hermansson, Max Griffin, Dan Ige, Devin Clark, Jeremiah Wells, who else? Zach Pauga. And I'll have Hyder, Amil tomorrow as well too. I'm supposed to talk to him, so got you covered for that. I'll have a tweet out tomorrow. Normally I put it up Monday because I'm interviewing Hyder tomorrow. Figured I'll just do the tweet out there tomorrow. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Got a big week of interviews, guys. So keep the lookout there. And yeah, my DMs are always open if you guys want to chat. And thanks so much for having me on, man. You know I love doing this show, so I always appreciate the invite. And who you liking tonight? I guess we're kind of into hockey already, but I took the Rangers at home against the Avs, and I took the Leafs, but you just mentioned the Islanders scored, so maybe they're going to get this one. But I did take the under as well on the Rangers and Avs too. So.
Oh, man. Good call on that under. I actually thought about the under. It's still Colorado 1-0 right now.
There we go.
James, I hate to say it, we're head-to-head on both. I'm on the Islanders, and I'm on the Avalanche. I've got the lead in both games right now, praying they don't blow it. So, 2-1 Islanders, 1-0 Avalanche, but the under in that Avs game, I think, is pretty much the nuts. That was the best bet you could have possibly made. So good work there.
Cool.
When are you coming out to watch a Coyotes game?
I want to come out soon. So I'm actually going to Vegas a week before UFC 300 because I got tickets to the Canucks Knights. And then I'm going back to Vegas a week after to cover UFC 300. More importantly, when are you coming to Vegas? Because we got to meet up. I told you about this. Yeah. That's
the question right there, James. That's the thing that needs to happen. I'm not even that far away from Vegas. The problem is I've got a daughter that's that age where we're running around busy all the freaking time. And my wife's
Clint, I just want to remind you, I got 2 kids. Okay. So trust me, I use the kid excuse all the time, but I don't know if you got a grandparents or anyone around, get them to watch, the kid for a night or two, come out to Vegas. We'll go have first drinks on me and we'll for first fireballs on me, I should say. I don't know.
There you go. No, I love that idea.
We'll figure it out. We got to go see hockey game. You're right. Arizona, I would love to make it down. If I can get a cheap ticket and I can find a way to go to a game, I would love to go because I just want to go to Mullet Arena just to see it.
Absolutely. I did it for the first time this year. Mullet is awesome. But the real problem that I'm having right now, James, is my little sister is getting married. So the next couple of months are going to be like, we're, batten down the hatches. Everybody's helping. We're all doing stuff. This weekend, I was running around picking up last minute shopping things for her bridal shower that she was. So, it's a mess. It's an absolute mess right now. I would love to get to Vegas. I want to go meet people. I want to go do, the in-person thing and go do some fireball shots with my boys.
Well, in International Fight Week, I'm telling you, that's the time to go. Everyone comes out for that. It's a really good fan experience. They have the fan expo and all that too. Highly recommend, and not just you, but anyone who's if you're a big fan, I would totally recommend going to International Fight Week, regardless of what the card looks like, because they have the fan expo. I'd almost just do the expo and not even do the fights. Go watch a fight somewhere else. Tickets are always too expensive. Just go to the fan experience. There's 200 fighters there. You'll meet someone you want to see, and it's really cool, some of the stuff they're doing over there.
I did that before I started the podcast. I went out and I actually competed at Grappler's Quest at the fan expo.
Cool.
Back before I got into podcasting and I was taking it seriously. So got to meet Ryan Bader. I got to meet Mike Swick. It was a really cool event and a really good time. So I can vouch for that experience. You guys should definitely go and check that out. But I need to do it now that I'm an official podcaster and trying to take this thing seriously and take the show on the road. COVID messed me up. I was supposed to go that year and then it shut down and I haven't been able to break away since. So that's on me. I got to get my ass to Vegas. Regardless, Thank you again for being here, James. Everybody make sure you support our guy here. Hit the like button on your way out if you haven't already. And since James mentioned it, go do yourself a shot of Fireball. I know it's Monday night. Nobody cares. Just one shot, not 6. Go have some fun. Watch some hockey with us. Good luck if you're betting and DJing out on basketball, because I know that's what a lot of you guys are doing right now. Out the door, though, James, who's winning the Super Bowl?
I got to go KC. Just listen, as much as it's going to be annoying to see Taylor Swift get, more minutes of airtime, I think it's likely. You got to go with Mahomes is just clutch no matter what, right? So you got to go Mahomes this way. And looks like I upset Clint. No, I'm joking. He somehow fell off here. Now I'm hosting the show. This is usually my gig.
By your answer, I left the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Probably kind of looked like that too. So
I moved my mouse and I clicked by accident when I was just trying to wiggle.
It's all good. It's all good. You could do that and I'd still like you, Clint. That's how cool of a guy you are. So it's all good.
I appreciate you, James. All right, everybody. That's the show. Thank you all for being here. Have a wonderful week. Good luck on all your degenerate action. Let's get some of that money back this week, and we'll see you Thursday for the Total Takedown. We'll see you Friday for the Undefeated Post Weigh-In Show. And if you need a fight companion where you've got live streams and bets going on, right here, Pub Sports Radio, every single week on Saturday. Thank you guys from the bottom of my heart. Seriously, means the world. You guys support me to this extent, still to this day. I know I get all mushy on you all the time, but that's just how I am. So get out of here. We'll do a drunk stream right around the corner. And if you guys haven't checked out my Twitter, last thing, I promise I will let you go after this. The schedule I've got for February is legendary. James is kicking us off here to start this week. Next week for UFC 298, we've got one of the best gamblers in the business, Lucrative MMA, is coming on the show. And then bucket list for me, James, I got none other than Luke Thomas to agree to come on the show for Moreno versus Royval 2. I've been wanting to do a show with that guy forever. I've listened to him for years. It's literally a checklist, bucket list item for me to get to actually speak to him and break that card down. So I'm pumped. And then we anchor the month on none other than Aaron freaking Bronstetter. So we've got an all-star cast this month, guys. You're not going to want to miss the show for February. So make sure you come back around. We'll see you next week. Let's roll.